First thing we need to do is swear you in.
Yes, sir.
You swear or affirm that the testimony that you're about to give in this proceeding shall be the truth and nothing but the truth.
I do.
And state your full name for us and spell your last.
It's James Sens, S-E-N-S, with Control Point Associates
Okay?
in Warren, New Jersey.
Jim, you're a professional licensed surveyor in the state of New Jersey,
Yes, I am.
and your license is current,
It is.
and you testified before other land use boards.
I have.
Your office prepared the subdivision plan
Yes,
that
it
was
did.
submitted with the application.
Yes.
Could you briefly describe the subdivision that's proposed here tonight?
Certainly. The current lot consists of a southerly portion, which is made up, there's a lot of lots and blocks, or lots here in this block, so it's made up of lots 5.05, 5.12, 5.22, lot 6 rather, 7.01, 7.02, 13, 14, 1501, 1602, 1603, 1701, and 1702. That's in block 37, and lots 1 through 7 in block 42. That area is 22.214 acres. The subdivision is on 2 sheets. That area is primarily shown on the first sheet. On the first sheet, the property is bisected by lot 5.03, which is borough-owned land. The northerly portion of the property is block 5.05, also in lot 37. The plan is to subdivide the southerly portion south of the lot 5.03 into 3 lots with 7.4 acres as a future proposed redevelopment parcel. There's no development plan as far as this application. And 2 open space, or 1 open space parcel, proposed open space parcel, and a future open space lot.
And that future open space lot, I have that as 5.541 acres.
That's correct.
The open space parcel as 9.213 acres.
That's correct.
And when we add that together, just for purposes of consistency with the redevelopment plan, together with 503 and 504, we get a total of 19 and change. Can you give us that exact number?
I can. That is 19.719 acres.
Thank you. And the subdivision is fully conforming?
Yes, it is.
Just to introduce the Exhibit B, can we go ahead and pull up the redevelopment parcel exhibit?
Certainly.
We received a review letter from your planner dated July 19th. One of the comments in that letter was that we confirmed the lot areas were consistent with the redevelopment plan. Jim, I believe that this is an overlay of the subdivision plan onto Exhibit B, I believe, from the redevelopment plan.
That's correct.
So it just shows the subdivided lines over the redevelopment plan.
That's exactly right.
And confirms that those areas are consistent with the redevelopment plan.
Correct.
And I can have Matt Allen also speak to that. He's representative of the URE entity. He'll be able to speak to the redevelopment a little bit more.
Okay.
So unless there are any questions.
Consent remains, because we'll have to answer the planner's questions.
I'm sorry, what was that?
Don't go anywhere, Mr. Sessions.
No, he's
I'll stick
available
around.
All right.
for questions from members of the board or the public at this point, or?
We'll hold public questions for the complete the professionals. There's a master secretary for this witness. Doesn't look like we have any, so I think you're okay.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Very good, thank you.
Don't go anywhere.
I'm not going.
We have Matt Allen.
You swear or affirm that the testimony that you're about to give in this proceeding shall be the truth and nothing but the truth.
I do.
And state your full name and spell your last, please.
My name is Matthew Allen, A-L-L-E-N. I'm the Director of Development for Client Enterprises.
And Matt, can you please explain your role in connection with the redevelopment plan for the subject property and this proposed subdivision?
Sure. After the subdivision of the parcel, we will take title to the development parcel and execute a development of a multifamily apartment community on the property. That's in accordance with the redevelopment plan.
Okay. So I believe you're a director of development of a related entity to the area applicant. That's yours.
Correct.
So you heard Mr. Sims talk about the proposed lot areas as a result of the subdivision that's consistent with the redevelopment plan. Is that your understanding as well?
It is.
Okay. As a result of another comment that we had in the planner's review memo was to confirm that no development is proposed in connection with this application. Is that correct?
Correct.
And there was a request for a estimated time frame for when we would come back for a site plan application for that development proposal, which will be subject to the review of this board.
Sure.
Can you give us an estimated time frame of where you are with that?
Sure. If we receive approval tonight, we'll be filing a site plan application and call it the next 60 days.
Okay. And in the exhibit B here that we have, there's a proposed open space parcel and a future open space parcel. Can you explain why we have the future open space parcel?
As part of the redevelopment of the parcel, it's the county's intention to purchase the open space parcels of the property. As part of the development, there are some improvements that are planned for the future open space parcel that includes some access improvements and utility improvements that will also benefit the future county park. In order to keep things simple and allow construction of those improvements, one of the development entities is going to retain ownership of the future open space parcel until after the improvements are constructed. And then, as part of the contract with the county, that land will be turned over to the county after the improvements are on it. So that's the reason for separating an open space parcel from a future open space parcel, is just to keep ownership separate and clarify what we're going to be doing on those parcels.
And again, even with that future open space parcel and the proposed open space parcel, we still get, the total of collectively of the open space parcel is compliant in conformance with the redevelopment plan.
Correct.
Okay. Just a bit of housekeeping, if I may, with the planner's review memorandum. It mentions that the application shall be revised to indicate its preliminary and final subdivision approval, and to indicate that we seek various submission requirements, various waivers from submission requirements. We can go ahead and amend that application as a condition of any approval this board may seek to grant, and we can also submit the reference survey as well as a condition of any approval. And just with respect to the engineer's review memo dated July 20th, we take no exception to the comments therein and will comply as a condition of any approval. I have nothing further for Mr. Allen unless he wants to add anything, and he's available for questions.
Mr. Allen, I just want to make sure I heard you correctly. Did you indicate that there would be a site plan application in the next 60 days?
Correct.
Okay, so then we'll see what development you're proposing for the two lots.
Correct.
That are not yours.
And that development is consistent with both the redevelopment plan and the community meetings that we had held up to this
So
date.
that
So
means you'll be back to the board.
we will.
You're not done with us yet.
No.
Well, as I go over the planner's memo and the engineer's memo, I think I spoke prematurely, because really you don't have too many bullet points, Chris, other than that diagram. So, yes, I guess, other than questions from board members, and we can also include your testimony. Board members, do we have any questions? Bob, you okay with opening up to the public?
Yes, I'm open to the public. Why don't we do, you want to do just questions first, or you want to do,
The consensus seems to be let's do it all, so.
okay? All right, so if that's the case, then what we're going to do is you can ask, if you're a member of the public and you want to, you can ask questions of any of the witnesses. You just tell us who you want to ask questions of. If you just want to make a statement, you're allowed to do that. We're going to, just to make it easy, I'm going to swear everybody in who comes up so that we don't have any questions spilling into opinions. And that's it. Other than that, we're going to leave it. I'm going to turn it back to the chair to recognize whoever the chair chooses.
Thank you, Bob. Let's formally open the public portion, and if you have a question or a statement, come on over to the microphone. Come on down, there'll be shot, tell us your name and where you live and what's on your mind. Oh.
I'm going to ask you to be sworn in, please.
Sir.
Would you raise your right hand? Do you swear or affirm that the testimony that you're about to give in this proceeding shall be the truth and nothing but the truth?
I do.
And state your full name for me and spell your last.
My name is Angela Dole, D-O-H-L, and I am actually chairman of the Environmental Commission in Metuchen.
Okay?
I'm here for 2 reasons tonight. One, to express the Environmental Commission's support of this project. We're very excited that this property will be able to be redeveloped both in a manner that will help serve the community in the redevelopment part, but the aspects of the open space that will help to allow more recreation areas for members of the public in Metuchen. So the Environmental Commission is in full support of this project. I also just wanted to address one other issue. There has been some activity online today insinuating that the Environmental Commission has not been allowed the opportunity to comment and review this project, and I want to say for the record that that is absolutely inaccurate. The Environmental Commission has reviewed the plans for this project. The Environmental Commission members have spoken to both the original property owners and the redevelopers when they first started a plan to work on this project. We attended the public meeting that was held at the high school and were available to answer environmental questions for the public at that meeting. And we have also been involved with the property owner, and I'm not sure if it's a developer or not, on Earth Day cleanup that worked on that site. We visited the site, we have been there, we know what the plans are. We are in full support of this project moving forward so that this open space area can be added to other open space areas in Metuchen and allow that recreation to continue. Thank you.
Other members of the public, question, comment, come on down, listen up. Come right over to the microphone, just tell us your name and your address and what's on your mind.
Would you raise your right hand, please? Do you swear or affirm that the testimony that you're about to give in this proceeding shall be the truth and nothing but the truth?
Yes, I do.
All right, state your full name and spell your last for me.
Charles Cradaville, K-R-A-T-O-V-I-L,
Okay, and your address?
143 Sedan Street in New Brunswick.
Okay. You want to ask a question, make a statement?
I'd like to make a statement and launch a procedural objection. Not sure if you received my letter I sent earlier today. I would like to enter a document into the record, if that's okay. May I approach?
I don't know, what's the document?
It is a letter from me to the board, along with an email to you, and the ANJAC resource paper titled Site Plan Subdivision Review Protecting the Environment During Development.
Sure, we'll file them with the board secretary.
One copy or enough for
One's enough.
most? Oh,
Thank you.
fair enough. So, members of the board, my objection is very simple. I know the chairwoman addressed her support for this and the support of the Environmental Commission. But it's my understanding that there's a state statute, NJSA 40:56A-1, that actually requires the Environmental Commission have a seat at the table and a vote on this board. And in my review of the board members, as I see it, there's not that joint member. Perhaps, Mr. Chairman, if I'm wrong, you'll correct me. Is there any member of the planning board that's...
I'm not even aware of this requirement, so, you know, if it's true, you're educating me. I don't know if it's true or not, Bob. I don't know if you know.
Yeah, I'll be happy to correct Mr. Kravitz-Hill. While the statute appears to someone who is not a lawyer to require, or may appear to a person such as yourself who is not a lawyer, to require a member of the Environmental Commission to be on the planning board. In fact, it is not a requirement. There is a specific ruling by the Appellate Division of the Superior Court of New Jersey, the Appellate Division being the second highest appeal court in the state, which specifically ruled that NJSA 4055D23, which is the statute about membership on the planning board, does not require that a member of the Environmental Commission serve as a member of the planning board. Rather, the statute merely provides that in the event that an environmental commission exists, as one does in this case in Jersey City, a member of the environmental commission who is also a member of the planning board shall, with certain exception, be a Class 4 planning board member. Consequently, in this case, the court ruled consequently, even though the planning board did not include a member of the environmental commission, the planning board's resolution was not invalid or unenforceable. In this case, there was a person who made the same objection that Mr. Kravatill does. So it isn't a valid objection. And just to be sure, or as sure as I could be, that was still currently the law. That was a 1996 case, so I checked my 2022 edition of what's called New Jersey Zoning and Land Use Administration, which is what is commonly called by all lawyers the Cox Book. And the Cox Book, COX, says that basically the same thing this case says, although and if there is there must be a member of the planning board on the environmental commission, but there is no requirement that there be a member of the environmental commission on the planning board. So there is no such requirement.
Okay, I will review the Cox book, but I would draw your attention to the item I'm submitting into evidence, the Amjac site plan subdivision review protecting the environment during development. You do see on page 3, quote, the environmental commission must have a seat on the planning board. Quote, both the MLUL and the law enabling environmental commissions require that a member of the environmental commission be a member of the planning board. It does cite one of those statutes, NJSA 40:55D23 and 40:56A1. I believe this source is from 2021, so much more recent than the case you cite. I understand you've got the book there. I do think that it would be in the best interest of everyone involved if there were an environmental commissioner seated on the board, and there would be a formal process for them to have input on these applications as they go forward. I did, in my letter, cite some of the remarks made at last night's environmental commission, which is on video.
Okay, I'm sorry, I don't mean to interrupt, but we are in the middle of a hearing, so I'm going to ask you if you could confine your remarks, if you have any, to the development proposal, because I've already ruled that the objection is not valid. So if you have a comment about the development proposal, please feel free to make it.
That is all. I respect your ruling. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Council. Okay. Mayor?
Well, are there other members of the public looking to address?
Well, he was next, and we're going to ask for our next person to come out, but I don't see any hands right now. Is there anybody else from the public? Okay. So we'll close the public portion, Mayor, before you proceed, or?
Yeah.
Okay, so we'll close the public portion. Please proceed.
Yeah, if I can, and I appreciate everybody, I'm going to be here for one of the 2 hearings. I have a conflict on the second, personal conflict on the second hearing that I won't be here for, but I appreciate you having me, and obviously William Love is my alternate, or I should say my substitute representative, and does a fine job in my absence. I'm a little confused about the objection. I mean, this is the second night in a row, Mr. Cradaville, that you've been here in Metuchen. You have every right to be here. You're a member of the public. We deeply respect that in the borough. Even though you are a candidate for mayor in the city of New Brunswick, wish you luck in your race in that regard. I know you're a paid employee of Food and Water Watch, which is why you were with the Environmental Commission last night. I happened to attend the meeting with the Environmental Commission last night. I also was part of a discussion about how incredible this project is for the entire borough. And every member of the Environmental Commission, if they didn't speak in favor of this project, spoke specifically by nodding their head as your video records, and spoke, in favor of, some of the people, perhaps even the person who you were trying to quote in your letter, spoke specifically about how incredible this project is for our borough. And, you know, it's a project that not only have the Environmental Commission spoken about last night, but they were very involved in helping us put these plans together. As Chairwoman Dole explained when she spoke a couple of minutes ago, she specifically described their role at the high school public proceeding that we had, where she and other members of the Environmental Commission hosted a table to discuss the environmental impacts, the positive environmental impacts that this project will have. So I just don't get it. It feels like, you know, I think between this and some of the messages that I think you posted earlier on social media and some of our local blogs, like there's an attempt to sow discord in our town. But I want to be very clear to you, okay, because we've known each other for some time. That's not how we do things here in the borough. This is a place that disagrees once in a while. In fact, many times we disagree. We have discussion, we have debates. They're respectful with one another. But the idea of coming here with the specific intent of sowing discord, which is what this feels like, especially in view of the conversation that you and I were both present for last night, is frustrating for me as the mayor who's charged with leading this borough and charged with helping to move projects like these along when they have overwhelming support in our community. So I want to be clear about that as the mayor of this town, as a member of this board on this proceeding. And I would hope that you take that into consideration. You're an open-minded guy. You work very hard on the causes that are important to you. But this is very important to us. So I just ask that you be a little bit more discriminate in the matters that you take up. I know that you tend to be passionate about certain things. In my view, although I can't tell you how to feel, this is not one of them. This is not one to choose. This is one that matters a lot to this community. And I hope you take note of that going forward.
Good, thank you, Mayor. Okay, applicant has completed the testimony, public portion is closed. At this point, Bob, other than to make...
It's a pretty clean application for a preliminary and final approval of a subdivision. You have the plan. I believe that a motion would be in order.
Okay, so Chair will entertain a motion.
Condition being, of course, that the applicant has agreed to comply with all the recommendations and requirements of both the professional's letter, the engineer, and the planner.
Absolutely.
I see yes being nodded, and now I hear absolutely. So.
There you go. Yes, that's okay.
So I would make a motion to move this project as Bob just described it.
Person? We have a
Second.
second. We have a second. Okay, please.
Ms. Clarkson? Yes. Councilmember Koskowski?
Yes.
Ms. Karlstein?
Yes.
Mayor Bush?
Yes.
Ms. Nowak?
Yes.
Mr. Lipton?
Yes.
Mr. Griffin?
Yes.
Ms. Cohen?
Yes.
Mr. Erickson?
Yes. Okay, motion is successful. We move forward.
Thank you very much for your time and consideration.
Okay, next up this evening is Metuchen, the LLC, applicant is seeking exception of orders. Crossing out and driving.
Mr. Chairman, just let the record reflect that the mayor has recused himself and left the room, and Mr. Love is back in as the designated. Ready to go.
Good evening, Stephen Tripp from the firm of Williams, Goldman and Spitzer on behalf of the applicant. Last time we had a hearing on this redevelopment area, I think it was virtual a number of months ago. And we're glad to be back in person. This is an application for a portion of the Okai redevelopment. It's parcel C. Right now, it's still part of lot 71, lot 3701, but eventually it's going to be subdivided into parcels. And what we're seeking tonight is preliminary and final site plan approval. There are some exceptions from some of the design standards in the redevelopment plan that we'll address. There also will be one deviation that was not originally sought, but as a result of complying with one of your planner's recommendations, there's a slight deviation from the maximum front yard setback, and we'll address that. Your planner asked for realignment of the roadway and the provision of parking spaces, and that had an impact of increasing the setback. And we'll address that, but that's something that is a direct result of compliance. Basically, we went through the DRC. We've got and got initial comments. We've reviewed the consultants' reports, and our professionals have been working with the consultants, both your engineer, your planner, and the traffic engineer for your engineering consulting firm to address issues that we've been made aware of concerning the application. We've been doing that over the past few weeks to comply. So what we're going to show tonight is we have a plan that is going to be an exhibit. It is the site plan we submitted, but with revisions that the engineer will explain that were designed to address the various comments. Because when we work with your professionals, they said rather than submit a full set of new revised plans that would have to be reviewed again, bring an exhibit and show how we're going to comply. So the engineer will be addressing that. Basically, what we're doing here is there's a Starbucks coffee shop is proposed. That use is specifically permitted in the redevelopment plan on this parcel C. And we substantially comply with the redevelopment plan. There are a couple of tweaks, and we'll address those, and we've discussed those with your consultants, and you'll hear more about that shortly. Basically, what I'd like to do is start with the representative of Starbucks, who can just explain a little bit about the operations, what we're proposing. We'll then have the site engineer, and then an architect will go over the facade, the signage, and we'll finish with a traffic engineer to address the traffic issues and the issue of the intersection of Greenway Avenue and Middlesex Avenue, which I know is of some concern to the borough. And we will, our traffic consultant has been in touch with your traffic consultant, and I think they're in agreement on how we're going to go forward. So, and we'll explain that.
Very good.
So what I'd like to do is start with Lizanne Kyle from Starbucks.
Excuse me, if the chair doesn't mind, I'd like to just switch my chair from there to Thank you. Just hold on. This arm just not working. Thank you. Thank you.
You swear or affirm that the testimony that you're about to give in this proceeding shall be the truth and nothing but the truth. State your full name for us and spell your last.
My name is Lizanne Kyle, K-I-L-E.
I'm sorry, can you please get up?
Sure. I'll get closer to the mic. Is that better?
There you go.
Okay. Lizanne Kyle, K-I-L-E.
Sure.
Yeah.
Thanks.
Okay.
Thanks.
Can you just tell us briefly what your position is with Starbucks?
Yes, I am a senior store development manager, and I am responsible for new store locations in North Jersey, and I'm also responsible for negotiating renewals and relocating stores.
And how long have you been with Starbucks?
16 years.
And basically, you're familiar with the location we're proposing.
Yes.
And can you discuss generally what you're intending here in terms of operations, hours, employees, what you expect at the site?
Sure, thank you. And thank you for your time this evening. Appreciate it. So our store hours are 5:30 to 10, Sunday through Saturday. Monday through Saturday. And Sunday is 6 to 9. We hope to employ 25 partners, as we call ourselves, or employees. We'll have 5 to 6 partners on shifts, 3 shifts a day. We hope to be a part of this community. We've wanted to be a part of this community for a very long time. We will offer a cafe with a drive-through and a walk-up window so that we can serve people kind of in the new way people would like to be served since the pandemic.
And there'll be indoor seating and there'll be outdoor seating as well, correct?
Yes.
And you're aware that we're now proposing 16 parking spaces, which would, under their ordinance, would support a maximum of 48 seats?
Yes.
And that works within your plan?
Yes.
In terms of deliveries, can you explain how the deliveries work?
Our deliveries occur starting anywhere between 6 p.m. and when we open. So our deliveries are 30 minutes. Our delivery person has keys to our store. They come in, they deliver milk, frozen product, and then they leave. So it's very quick, it's daily. The delivery truck is like a small box truck, 28 feet or so. It's not a tractor trailer. They'll be able to maneuver on site, especially if we're closed, and pretty seamless.
In terms of trash, the pickups, how does that work?
Trash is 2 to 3 times a week that we schedule that, and it's during our non-peak time, so not morning, when the least amount of people are at our site.
And can you comment on the staffing capacity that we're providing and whether you feel that's adequate and whether you feel it will work?
We're so thrilled with the staffing capacity, and here's the reason. The environment with customers has changed since the pandemic, and people would like to be in their cars, and so we're looking for longer stacks. And this stack is fantastic in that regard. One, there's a release valve. If someone changes their mind, they can leave the drive-through, park, and come in. It's a large site. We're happy about that. We've learned a lot of things since the pandemic, and so if we could get on larger sites and get a bigger stack, then usually the community and our customers are very happy, and our partners, because they can serve people with a smile instead of being rushed.
And there's staffing capacity is 10, correct?
Yes.
And what would happen would you expect that ever to be exceeded in terms of a problem?
Yeah, you can't ever say never. On occasion, it will happen. It's just life as we know it. But it is designed now. Our stores are so much better designed than they have been in the past. And those kinds of changes that we're doing are faster events. We're putting our equipment closer to the window, so it takes less steps to, let's say, heat a product, walk all the way to the drive-through window, and hand it off, right? So now the ovens are going to be near the window. So all of that saves time, it saves steps, and it makes for a quicker service. So all of those evolution of things are occurring daily with us. So we have MOP, which if you're not a Starbucks customer, it's mobile order and pay on your phone. You can put an order in, and it'll tell you what time to come. You can come in and park and walk in, and your order will be ready. So that service is really, really good.
So here there's going to be a pickup window?
Yes.
For that purpose?
Yes. Or the customers can walk in. So it's
either way?
Either way.
I don't have anything else.
Board members, questions?
Ms. Powell, you mentioned the walk-up window. Is that separate and apart from the entrance to the store and the window where you would be driving up? we're with someone, I mean, I anticipate that you would expect more than one person at a walk-up window.
Right.
So,
Well, the engineer, when we go through the site plan, he can show you directly where it is
okay.
and the area where people could wait. So that will be part of the site plan.
So that is a separate, so it's a separate area for
Correct.
both.
It is a separate area,
Or-
yes.
And drive up.
Yes.
Other board members? John?
Thank you. In your responsibility, were you involved in the development of the Starbucks on Parsonage and on 27, just near Parsonage Road?
Yes.
Okay. Experience many members of our community, that's medicine, but drive by, there is significant traffic. Sometimes the cars are in fact waiting out on 27. The changes that you're describing in the building, would you say that this location is designed differently than now?
Absolutely.
So in the time, because that was only a few years ago, right? So in that time, you've made these significant changes that you feel will mitigate some of the things we see from that location?
Absolutely. We were forced to make some quick changes based on the pandemic. So people wanting to stay in their cars, and those are the faster ovens, replacement, moving equipment around. We had to react. So, and that store is an older model. Although it may seem 3 years old, it was planned 3 years prior, because that's how long it take to go through this process in New Jersey. So it's probably a 6-year-old plan, so to speak.
And what's the stacking capacity there compared to this?
Not nearly enough, I'll just say that. Sorry, it's not, yeah. And there's no bypass lane there. It's an older model, so 5, maybe 6 before you tee into front of the parking spaces. So if you've been on site, you'll know what I'm talking about.
And here we have 10 spaces plus a bypass.
Oh, yeah. This is just a beautiful plan.
And as I assume you have some type of projections. Do you project a similar amount of traffic? I don't mean car traffic, I'm talking about sales, people coming to the new site.
We
Is
hope
that
so.
site more busy, less busy? I mean, are there projections you can share?
Not specific numbers, because they're only projections and it's kind of proprietary, but we hope that it does as well as Edison. We believe it'll do better, slightly better.
But the site is designed, you're testifying, to
Oh.
not generate the sort of issues that you see at times at Starbucks, that I'm just doing that reference.
Absolutely. There's so much more room.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
John? Other board members? Questions?
I got one.
Okay.
So about how long would you expect, let's say, early morning rush, right, car gets in, how long are they gonna be in line through the drive-through before they?
Our average time is 4 minutes from the time they order to the time they pick up. And the window time is measured as well. I think it's less important, but our cars are only at the window about 38 seconds.
Okay. So for,
4 minutes.
on
On
average,
average.
10 cars, 4 minutes idle?
Jim? Other board members? Okay. Mr. Tripp, please proceed.
Certainly. Thank you. David Wasotsky, our site engineer. Let me move this.
Why don't you let him have that one, Stephen, you keep this one.
That's fine.
That one comes, that's gotta, no, it's gotta, it comes out. You can hold
Yeah, yeah.
if you want. Okay.
Dave, you want to take it over? Sure.
Quick word of action.
All right, yep.
Excuse me, David, do you have a card?
Yes.
Do you have a moment, please?
Yeah, we will take. It's been so long, I don't carry them on myself anymore. Put it here.
Mr. Tripp, before you proceed,
Sure.
just clarify the number of parking spaces. I believe it was 17, not 16.
Actually, there was 17, but there was a request for a turnaround space. So, and the engineer requested it, we provided it, so that moved the number down to 16. So based on your ordinance now, our seat capacity will be 48 as opposed to 51.
It's not including the hours.
Dave, not including the hours.
Well, that's when we get the witness sworn.
That is included,
Okay.
total seats.
All right, well, let's swear him in first.
Yes.
That's a good idea.
Yeah, that's, first things first.
Are we ready? Do you swear or affirm that the testimony that you're about to give in this proceeding shall be the truth and nothing but the truth?
Yes, sir.
All right, state your full name and spell your last.
My name is David Wisocki, last name is spelled Wisottsky, principal with Bowler Engineering, located in Warren, New Jersey. And by way of qualifications, I've testified in front of this board before, in fact, in the same Oakite site plan in the last go around. But by way of qualifications, I have a bachelor's and master's in civil engineering, professional engineering license, state of New Jersey, among others, 31 years of practicing experience, which shocks me when I actually say that, and testified in well in excess of 200 land use boards in the state of New Jersey and other places.
We'll accept Mr. Wisocki as an expert and welcome him back to the board.
Thank you.
And this site plan was prepared by your firm, Bowler Engineering, correct?
Yes, I'm sorry. My notes somewhere. There we go. That one.
And you're familiar with the plan?
Yes.
And you've reviewed the consultant's reports as well?
Yes.
And you're familiar with the site?
Yes.
Okay, why don't you just very briefly describe the existing site conditions?
Right, and can the board see this plan, the one right here, the area? And
Why don't we mark that as A1?
Sure.
A1, this is an aerial exhibit prepared by my office dated June 16th, 2022. Marking A1 with today's date, July 21st. Right? Yes.
Yeah.
Okay. I realize the board is probably familiar with the site, being that it's only about 2 miles away from here. But it's, for the record, it is block 71, lot 37.01. It is part of the Oakite site redevelopment plan, which also includes the adjacent site, which is block 71, lot 37.02. But for purposes of tonight's discussion, we're really focused on that first parcel. For reference, north is towards the top of the page. The site is highlighted by the yellow boundary. We have Middlesex Avenue to the right side of the page, and then of course towards the top of the page you have Durham Avenue. And this is really just for orientation purposes. If there's not any other questions, I'll go into a little deeper explanation, or maybe reminding the board about the proposed plan for the redevelopment, so we can zero in on the site we're talking about here. Please. Okay, with that. One other exhibit, but this is actually included in the package. This is just for reference, so I don't think we have to mark it, but this is sheet C.
This was submitted as part of the site plan.
This is sheet C301, referencing the overall site layout plan and the future subdivision as part of the redevelopment plan. So just to reorient, and in this case, the north is going to be to the left of the page, and Middlesex Avenue is going to the top and bottom of the page along the south side here of the page, or the right edge. So the site is approximately 11 acres overall. The redevelopment plan area, that is, where the site under consideration, the parcel we're talking about tonight, is about 6.6 acres overall, and it's the portion of the site that's on the right side of this page. The site, the redevelopment plan called for 5 parcels to be developed. Parcel A, up in the southeast corner here, is the existing vacant bank building. And then to its north would be what's known as Parcel B, and that was a previously approved memory care facility that's pending but not built yet. Then you have Parcel C, which is in the southwest corner of the site, which is the site that we're talking about tonight. It fronts on Middlesex Avenue,
And when it actually does get subdivided, that parcel is going to be 0.76 acres in size. And this is the parcel that's going to house the Starbucks. That's the proposal for this evening. Moving to its north is proposed parcel D, which is going to be future development considered for and approved for as part of the redevelopment plan for senior living. And then towards the north end of the site is the sportsplex and the daycare center, which is known as parcel D. Running through the middle of that site, as we probably all know, also is a roadway that's going to be dedicated and made a municipal street known as Greenwood Avenue. It runs between Middlesex Ave and out to the north side to Durham Ave and connects the two pieces, Greenway Avenue. And that's actually where our parcel exits out onto Greenway Avenue, that municipal street. So I will get a little closer in detail on the site plan when we talk about our site specifics for parcel C, unless there's any questions on the overall development or the roadway.
Seeing any, please proceed.
All right, so why don't we move to your rendered site plan?
Yeah. So over here we have I guess this is
No,
the
that's A2.
good places for a second, not in anybody's way. Yeah. So this will be exhibit A2 then. And this is called site layout plan alternate, an exhibit prepared by our office on dated 7/17/2022. So this represents the site plan sheet 302 that was submitted as part of the application, colorized for presentation so it's easier to see, but with the comments taken from the DRC meeting and your professionals' letters included to show the proposed changes that were recommended, and the applicant will plan on undertaking.
And assuming a favorable decision by the board, the plans will be revised, the formal set will be revised to reflect these changes that we're going to go through.
Right, of course.
So first of all, why don't we start with what we're proposing? You heard the operational testimony. Now take us through the site plan.
Just dating this. So picking up where Roseanne has left off and orienting the board here. So this plan, this exhibit A2, also has north pointing towards the left side of the page, Middlesex Avenue, running up and down the page on the south side, parallel with the right edge. And proposed Greenway Avenue is then the proposed municipal road is right in the middle of the site, running left to right. So our parcel C is the piece to the west side of Greenway Avenue. And as far as coloration, so it's maybe easier to discern, the orangest color towards the top right of our lot is the actual building, the proposed building, which is a 2,250 square foot proposed Starbucks. And the darker gray colors are new pavement. The green colors are proposed landscape areas, and the lighter gray areas are pedestrian walkways and sidewalks. So this plan, as Steve has also mentioned, is in conformance with the requirements of the redevelopment plan, with the exception of a couple waivers for signage and buffers that we'll discuss as we get through the testimony, and as well as he mentioned the one deviation which happens as a result of a road modification that was requested by the board's professionals, which we'll also describe when we get to it. So I would just talk a little bit about the actual site and its function. With the building in the top right corner, you have pedestrian sidewalk and connectivity around its east and south sides, and also on the south side between Middlesex Avenue and the building is a patio, where seasonally there will be outdoor seating proposed there. And to answer the board members' questions, this side of the building, which is on that south side facing Middlesex Avenue, is also where the proposed walk-up window is that was just discussed before. It's towards, I'm picking a mark with it, it is actually indicated on the plan and on this drawing, but you can't see it from that, from your perspective. And on that front corner of the building, towards the left side is where that proposed walk-up is. So as far as, it's right where the patio is, so as far as stacking and the ability for patrons to wait there at the window if there is more than one customer, that they have ample space to wait there. So you have pedestrian connectivity around the building out to Middlesex Avenue and out to Greenway Avenue. The one access for vehicles on the site is towards the north end of the site. You have a two-lane driveway, one way out, one way in, from Greenway Avenue into the site. When patrons enter the site, they can then travel in a westerly direction and continue straight, where they will then enter the drive-through queue, which we'll discuss in a minute exactly how that works. Or if they take their first left, they enter into the parking field, where we originally had proposed 17 parking spaces. You just heard it mentioned before that due to one of the board professionals' comments, we've reduced the parking count to 16 parking spaces, leaving a turnaround space closest to the building. So in case a patron pulls in, looks for parking and decides they want to turn around, they have the ability to without even getting necessarily into a space.
And that will be striped according?
Yes, it's striped out so it's not meant for parking anymore. So with 16 spaces, that would mean we can have a maximum of 48 seats in the restaurant to meet the standard for the redevelopment plan parking requirements, and that works for the applicant in Starbucks. So that will be what we propose. 48 seats. That includes outside and inside. That's combined total. So that meets the requirement of the ordinance. So that's parking and.
Excuse me, Mr. Moxley. When you say seating is 48, that means that, does that include the patio seating?
Yes.
As well?
Yep.
So in total?
In total.
You're inside or outside, that's the max?
Yeah, that's the requirement, and that's what we'll do.
I'd just like to clarify that. The provisions in the yard plan indicate that the parking requirement is based on indoor seats, so there's no limit on the number of outdoor seats.
So if they wanted to have 48 seats inside with additional outside, that would still comply?
Correct.
Thank you. Appreciate the clarification. So I cover seating, patio, pedestrian access, parking. Now the drive-through. So in order to enter the drive-through queue, you pass the parking heading in the westerly direction, and then you take a left turn and you enter into the drive-through queue. As mentioned, we show the stacking for the 10 cars, and the 10th car is actually indeed well within the stacking range. So there's actually additional space to stack more cars if was necessary before it became a traffic issue that would impact even the parking of the site, let alone Greenway Avenue. So patrons enter, and in a typical fashion in a drive-through, they have a preview menu where as they're waiting in the queue, they can get an idea of some of the things they might want to order. And then they pull up, and where car number 7 is where the actual drive-through menu is, and the order is placed. Then they proceed through the queue. They have the pickup window on the western side of the building, and then they circulate in a clockwise direction back out through the site, back towards the parking area, and back towards the entrance area. What we've added, per comments and the discussion in the DRC meeting, first, as patrons get to the end of the exit of the drive-thru, there's a stop sign, and they have clear sight distance to see cars coming from the other way or any of the directions. But what we've also added, as cars come into the site and into the drive-thru, there's also a stop bar and signage to indicate that they're not to block the area. That's the intersection where people are trying to leave the drive-thru and people are trying to come into the queue to allow smooth flow to continue. We've also added colorized pavement there of a red paper brick type texture to indicate its difference to patrons. Thereby, the idea is to enhance the ability of traffic circulation through this area. One other aspect of this drive-through, as Luciana mentioned, There is a bypass where people can, if they decide they got in this line and they don't feel like waiting there anymore, or they got in there erroneously, there is a way to get out of the drive-through without going through the entire queue. And that's this other red brick area with depressed curves. So as they come up through, just past where the menu board is, they're able to leave the drive-through without waiting, if they indeed decide that was, they want to.
So, Mr. Wasowski, what would you say exactly where car number 4 or 5 would be in the queue?
Where the bypass is? That's car number 6. They'd have to be car number 6 or before in order to take it.
6 slot.
Mm-hmm. Yes. So that's drive-through, circulation. Steve, are there questions on that you want to talk about?
Well, no, I think that you explained the circulation. I think what I'd like you to do is, you talked about the menu boards. Why don't you cover where the trash enclosures are located?
Yeah, trash enclosure. So the trash enclosure is on the northwest corner of the site, just where I was just talking about the drive-through enter and exit. And that's in that corner, that corner of the site. As Lizanne mentioned, traffic's picked up about three times a week in off-peak times where they don't expect the drive-through to be queued up to its max or really queued anywhere near it. So the truck has ample circulation to pull straight in. It does do a back and K maneuver and pulls out, similar to the way their delivery truck functions. And there's a waiver associated with the buffering, but we'll get the waivers at the end.
Yeah, we'll get to those in a minute. One thing I wanted you to talk about was some of the other revisions. You discussed the pavement to discourage cars from blocking that area, the stop bar. But can you talk about some of the other things that we did for the DRC that are on this plan that aren't on the plans that were submitted?
Yes.
Starting with pedestrian connection for the patio area.
Right. So in the southeast portion of the site, there was additional pedestrian connectivity added, right where my finger is, in order to get patrons from the sidewalk on Greenway Avenue to be able to enter into the patio area even easier rather than walking around on Middlesex. So there's additional connection there. Talk about the do not block the box pedestrian connection.
Extending the brick wall.
Extending the brick wall. So, and I would get to this, I guess, when I talk about landscape and such, but since we're talking about the differences, right in the front of the parking area between Greenway Avenue and our parking lot, there was the proposal for a decorative brick wall to go along with the landscape to soften the feature of the appearance of the parking lot even more. And it was suggested that wall should indeed wrap around the northwest side of the parking area as opposed to just stopping. So we've actually extended that and added supplemental landscape to improve the aesthetic a little more.
And you'll talk about the landscaping changes a little bit later, correct?
Yes, we'll go into all that.
Now, the menu board was moved a little bit.
Yeah, per the discussion with the traffic engineer, the menu board was actually originally back by where car stacking number 8 was, and it was asked to be moved a little further up to add a little more behind the queue. So this was moved up to the front where car 7 is stacked, so we pushed it a little further in. I don't think it changes the operation too much. It operates just the way Lizanne had mentioned in her testimony.
And also, you added a continental pattern to the pedestrian crosswalks, which the planner requested.
He did.
Explain
In all
what that
pedestrian
is.
pedestrian crosswalks, you see the kind of the white bold striping that's proposed here, and that was really the change to make sure that's conforming, and we will.
And
Excuse me, I'm sorry, I just wanted to ask a question. Did I miss the part where you said there was bike parking?
Sorry?
Bike parking?
I hadn't talked about bike parking yet, but there is. Bike parking is in front of the store between Greenway Avenue and the store.
And what's the capacity for the bike parking?
Good question. Offhand, I don't know the exact number of bikes. And actually, Chris, in his comment letter, actually asked the same question. So we have a detail, but if I remember right, it's roughly about 6 bikes. But whatever the detail said. Chris's comment, and I might as well address it as we're talking about it, he indicated, he wanted to know a little bit more about how the bike stalls work right there, because they might interfere with the sidewalk, and we'll certainly adjust them to make sure they're not in the way of the sidewalk, but we'll keep the capacity that we have in place.
And was there also a change made to provide additional separation between the drive-through exit lane and the trash enclosure?
Well, there was, but I think there's a question
Yes,
here.
that's, I was thinking,
I
you
have
did
a
that
question.
question.
With the accessible parking spot, I see that there, but is it flat to, because it looks like there's a tree blocking one entrance, so where does the person go with their wheelchair?
Yeah, it's really just the way it presents when we colorize it, so that tree kind of looks like it takes up the space, but that's really just the canopy above the parking spaces. If you took a look at the site plan, you have two fully ADA compliant spaces there that meet all code, and in addition to the grades and the ramps and everything else.
So you go straight out of this car and around?
Yeah, you park in either one of these first two spaces, and then right up in between the two vehicles is the press curb and ADA path accessible all the way to the front entrance of the building. Sure, so to answer Steve's question, it was also asked, this was a slight deviation from the plan that was submitted, to add additional landscaping and curbing between the drive-through exit and the trash enclosure to fully delineate those spaces. So this curb down here in this northwest corner was bumped out a little bit, and a little more landscape area was added. And other than the landscape, which I'll talk about when we get to landscape like that, that's the main changes on site, but I should probably also mention the change that's shown in Greenway Avenue.
Absolutely.
Right.
That was going to be my next question.
Right. So the plan is submitted at the end of Greenway Avenue, on its south end where it enters into Middlesex. The plan had 3 lanes at the exit, with one entrance off of Middlesex into the site, and 2 lanes leaving Greenway Avenue, one for a left lane turn and one for a right lane turn. The traffic engineer will talk a little bit more about this when he talks about the reasons behind it and the methodology. But in summary, the engineers and the traffic engineers discussed, and we all collectively decided that we prefer to have 1 lane leaving Greenway Avenue. So now it's a 2-lane road. And what that allows us to do is create a little more buffer in front of between the store and the property and the future property line and the curb, and also add some on-street parking in front of the store on Greenway Avenue.
3 spaces?
There's 3 spaces.
And
that'll be in the public right away.
And providing that, did that result in the minor deviation that I referenced before?
It did.
And the ordinance, the redevelopment plan has a maximum setback from the building to the curb line of 25 feet.
25.
And providing the parking spaces in the way that was now configured to address the reports, what's the setback?
It brings us to 28.6 feet rather than the 25 feet that's required in the ordinance as a maximum. So this is one of those ordinances where there's a minimum and maximum required setback. In other words, the building has to be up near the front and street facing, which it still is. But when we reduce the width of the road and increase the buffer and add parking and change that traffic system out front, it actually results in a setback that's slightly larger than that 25 feet. So we would be asking for that deviation.
Is it 26.8 or
28.6? Rather than 25 is the standard.
And just to clarify, the plan submitted complied with the 25?
It did.
Yes.
Yeah, I just want to make sure I heard you correctly. So there's, what's the name of that green space, right?
Greenway Avenue.
1 lane out, 1 lane in.
Yes.
Over Middlesex.
Off of Mill. Yes.
Okay. I just wanted to make sure.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if you were able to answer this question, but,
I'm sorry, Ms. Carter, can you just speak up a little bit more for me, please? I'm
just to
sorry.
follow up on Ms. Kyle's testimony about the Starbucks that was further down. When would we anticipate seeing the Starbucks built? So this plan is being presented in 2022 for a building that's going up like when?
Well, I think as soon as we are able to get the approvals, county approvals for the roadway and the intersection, we would be able to begin to do it. I mean, the access may all happen simultaneously, but the site is going to access Greenway Avenue. So Greenway Avenue will have to be built at least up to the end of the site in order to access.
And then final approval and the subdivision of it done and the road dedication and the county approval. So there's like a number of.
There are other things that are going to be happening.
Things that have to happen first. So sorry, I didn't answer your question
We
right.
have lots of questions for you, be patient with us.
Sure.
Question, just to understand your testimony. Originally, the road was three lanes wide without on-street parking. That was changed based on the recommendation of our borough professionals? Or I didn't quite understand who decided to make that change?
Well, there was the DRC, there was review, there was also, there's two things. There were comments from Mr. Cosenza, and there were comments from Collier's traffic engineer.
Okay. The third lane was simply like a 50-foot wide right turn lane. That's all it was. And in traffic analysis, in the original traffic report that was submitted, they were taking credit for 2 lanes exiting the site. And there was a difference of opinion on the distribution of the traffic from Durham and from Middlesex. So our traffic engineer picked up on that and said you can't use it as a second lane because it's only 50 feet long. 3 cars get in it, and it's a single lane backed up on backing up towards the sportsplex. So it's not like a third lane was originally designed to go through the whole site. You follow?
So in
That
the
makes
traffic,
sense?
yeah, will we hear more? Should I hold my questions about this?
We have the traffic engineer will be testifying.
Okay,
They also have a traffic
So
engineer for
I'll
traffic.
hold my question.
Our traffic engineer will testify about his discussions with Collier's traffic engineer who authored the comments in the report that dealt with traffic.
Okay, and the generation of the on-street parking?
Generation of the on-street parking, I believe, was Mr. Cosenza wanted to see some parking spaces if possible.
Yes.
All right, listen.
I was just going to say, I don't recall that when we were having our DRC meeting, was that a recommendation you made afterwards? Because I have concerns about that.
Yeah, I don't remember the specifics, I mean, as long as the on-street space is designed with the proper setbacks from crosswalks. If there's an opportunity to add on-street parking, it should be explored, in my opinion. It's also, from an aesthetic and urban design perspective, it's trying to shorten that crosswalk across Greenway Avenue, eliminate that third lane. And I had doubts from a non-engineering perspective whether the right turn lane served the purpose that it was intended for. So everything was really straightened out. But regarding on-street spaces, I don't remember if it was at the DRC meeting or afterwards.
Okay.
But we had gotten input to put them in, and they were put in at that request. So if the board is obviously free to discuss whether or not they really want those spaces there, but we put them in order to address your consultants.
Listen, did you want to expand on the concern about the parking or?
I just think that it would cause some, I always envisioned, maybe it's my own vision, but I always envisioned no parking on Greenway Avenue.
I think we could revisit that one in the applicant's traffic engineer.
Okay, this was the first I was hearing about it.
I understand. No, I
So
understand.
it took me a little off guard, and I just,
I believe.
I'm envisioning it solely from the perspective of
Right.
plowing, maintenance, and all of those things. And it's,
I agree.
And,
thank you.
yeah, the other thing you'll hear from the traffic engineer in detail is the comments from the Collier's traffic engineer regarding our analysis and our signal warrant analysis. The change to the 1 lane plus changing the distribution is going to more strongly support a traffic light, which we're going to go back to the county with the borough. And you'll hear more about this from the traffic engineer. Try to convince the county to go along with the traffic study.
Okay, let's keep it
Um,
going.
streets ever go on?
We did.
Landscaping?
Correct.
Landscape lighting, yeah. So, we've added significant, I think, landscape towards this parcel, future parcel C that's under consideration. As the plan is submitted, included five shade trees, 31 deciduous shrubs, 114 evergreen shrubs, 230 perennials.
I'm sorry, hold on, 141, just spell it from there.
31 deciduous shrubs, 114 evergreen shrubs, and 230 perennials and ornamental grasses were proposed around the site. That's exclusive of the street trees and the street shade trees that were also proposed, or that actually exist and are to remain. But after the DRC and some discussion, there's supplemental landscape that will be added towards the inner green circle inside the drive-through area, and also along the western edge of the property. There's going to be additional evergreens put there. And the reason for that is we have the grading of the site is lower on the east side, and towards the west side, it begins to raise up. Middlesex Avenue, as it travels towards the west, raises up, and then Factory Road behind the site raises up significantly as it goes to the north behind our site. So there is actually a sizable embankment there now. So in order to put the development in, we're actually going to be placing a retaining wall along that to meet where that embankment now comes. And in order to soften the appearance of that retaining wall, it's going to have a row of junipers placed in front of it. They get planted at 6 to 7 feet. They'll grow up to 15 feet and really soften out much of the wall. So that really covers, I guess, the landscape. It complies, and the lighting, just in summary, does comply with all the ordinance requirements. There are 3 pole-mounted lights and then 13 building-mounted lights which round out the site, and they meet all the redevelopment requirements, all the ordinance requirements.
Now, in terms of...
We have a question.
So I understand it. I recently read something that Starbucks and Volvo created a partnership for EV charging, so I'm just curious if there will be a charging station in this.
That had come up in the comment letters as well. The answer is no. Based on the size of this parking lot, it is our opinion, is not required. There are EV charging stations in other locations within the Okai redevelopment area, but they're not planned at this time in this lot.
Okay. And one other thing really quickly, the pickup window, did you say that that's facing Middlesex Avenue?
The
what?
walk-up,
I'm sorry.
the walk-up pickup window faces Middlesex.
Okay, cool, thank you.
You may hear a little more about this later, but the redevelopment plan has some specific requirements for EV charging associated with other uses and parcels, and leaves this to essentially the redevelopment agreement, which basically says state law. We believe state law says if it's a retail use, it's 25 spaces, under 25 spaces. There's no EV requirement. And I know Chris and I have had a discussion about whether this technically constitutes a retail use or not. As the term is typically used, it is. I know your ordinance talks about retail, it talks about restaurant uses. Generally, it's considered to be within retail. At least that's our interpretation. But we can obviously, when we go through Chris's report, we can deal with it again.
And then, okay. So then, to briefly discuss the more uninteresting engineering stuff that happens underground, we're connected to all public utilities and we have a stormwater management system that functions and meets all required standards. We have we've handled the water quality requirements. There are underground water quality filtration units that are 3 of them that are being placed on the site to meet that standard. And then everything else meets regulation requirements as it's supposed to.
Now, as the signage, the architect will show the signs on the architectural plans, but can you just summarize what relief we need so the board has context when they look at the plans?
Yeah, and then we'll talk about the sign waivers and then a couple of the buffering and other waivers that we have to kind of sum up. But I'm going to just mention the signs in general to you, so just to get the waivers on the record. When you see the architect explain the site plans and show you the elevations, you'll see where the signs are. So The sign package for the building includes seven proposed signs. There are signs on each of the 4 faces, but we do not have any freestanding signs in this proposed in this location. Hence the need, we think, for additional signage on the building to identify one, the Starbucks that so patrons know from the distance coming from either side that they know what they're approaching, and also there's a sign that mentions drive-through and gives them area notation so they have directional, so they know where to go. But for the record, it looks like the requirement or the allowance in the ordinance is for 1 sign.
No, it's for 3 altogether, based on the 2 street frontages and facing the parking area. So we're allowed a total of 3.
Allowed 3, but we have 7 because we have actually a couple of smaller signs on each of the sizes, on each of the sides. From area perspective, 24 square feet is the standard. 6 of the 7 signs meet the 24 square feet standard, where 1 sign, which is the one in the rear of the site, actually is 27 square feet. But I think once you see the architectural and the context and how it fits in the building and why it's sized like that, it should give you some context. 3 of the signs, which are the actual circular Starbucks logo, are 5 feet in height, where 3 feet is the standard. But once again, I think a picture is going to be worth 1,000 words. So once you see it, maybe there'll be some questions in the dialogue. And then the last waiver is regarding the sign on the rear in width too, where the standard is 12 feet, but that sign actually winds up being 16.25 feet, which I think once again blends into the architecture, gives good site visibility from all directions for good access into the site.
Now, in terms of the other waivers or exceptions.
Yes. So there are a couple, and one is there's a standard in the redevelopment ordinance for uninterrupted public sidewalks across driveways, which means its intention is that there's not ramps at sidewalks, but rather at the sidewalk you have a tabling effect, and the sidewalk remains straight, and you have a ramp up and over on either side of that actually the vehicles. But in looking at the context of all the driveways that are around it, existing and proposed, none of them have that. So we actually think it's a better design to use standard depressed curb sidewalks and typical crosswalks as you see in most places. And most of the sites around here have the same. So that's why we propose to keep it that way.
And then there was a question, that one we clearly are asking for relief. There's also a question in Mr. Cosenza's report regarding the requirement of pedestrian crosswalks at all corners. We believe we've provided that. If there's a reason why we would need relief, we just want a clarification.
Yeah, the comment referring to Greenway Avenue, Middlesex Avenue intersection, submitted plans had no crosswalks, and this sketch.
At Greenway from Middlesex here?
Correct.
Okay, we will comply with that. We don't need that waiver.
Yep, and then
Across Middlesex?
No, across Greenway.
Across Greenway. Yeah, we'll add that.
but as a function of coordinating with the county, the redevelopment plan contemplates crosswalks across Middlesex Avenue to Jailhouse Park.
And that's correct. And that will be provided again, subject to county approval. It's going to have to be, it's one of those items that's going to have to be discussed with the county where they want the crosswalk.
Right, thank you.
But we will provide it.
And then we have
So assuming that, we need no relief from that requirement, correct?
Yes, Bob, what do you think? They will provide a subject to county approval.
Right.
So probably not an exception. It's been eliminated.
Okay. And then we have a shade tree requirement, which we have shade trees along Greenway Avenue. We have shade trees along Middlesex Avenue, but this property actually happens to have 3 road frontages because Factory is directly behind it. And we do not propose shade trees along Factory. A couple reasons. One, like I mentioned, we have a significant differential of elevation, and which separates our site from Factory. So our site has no access to it. Doesn't really technically front it. and everything happens right on the Greenway and the Middlesex sides. Two, there's existing overhead lines and wires along Factory, and kind of fully fully grown out like vegetation and stuff that exists there. So we propose not to add the shade trees on the factory side.
And then screening requirements for trash enclosure.
And then the screen on the trash enclosure. So I think this is also another technical waiver, because our trash enclosure, like I mentioned, is tucked into the northwest side. Its western edge actually butts up against the retaining wall that's going to be behind it, so there's really no buffering to provide behind the trash enclosure, because it's already buffered by a wall that's taller than it. We have buffering along its south edge as required, and then on the north edge, that's subject to a future development where they'll also be doing grading work and such right against that corner when that development is actually proposed and designed and done, where they would likely have to remove any vegetation that we've done, and when they build that, they will actually be doing their buffering along our very northern edge to buffer themselves from the trash enclosure. So we don't feel it's just prudent to add that at this time or useful. Plus, it's really not seen from anywhere.
So that's an exception.
That would be an exception.
So the relief that we're requesting, can you characterize the relief as if we had to strictly comply, or would be impracticable to do that at this point?
Yes, I think the ones we proposed are of a de minimis nature, and also in the spirit of the redevelopment plan, and actually, if anything, kind of enhance the design and allow it to be the good product that we see here, or in my opinion.
I'm sorry, the good, what that we see here?
Good product we see here, in my opinion. And I believe that's really everything except for questions or comments. Other than what we've addressed directly, we plan on complying with the content of your professionals' letters.
Yeah, we can go through those. I suggest we go through the details of the reports to the extent that anything wasn't specifically addressed once we're done with all the testimony. Because the architect will address some of the things, and the traffic engineer certainly will address a number of those.
As I said before, just stick around.
Yeah, he's not going to.
Be your own.
Okay. Other questions, board members, before we move on?
I do, I have a comment to make. I have to say I was a little disappointed in the fact that most of this, your testimony, had to do with how to manage the cars, the stacking of the drive-through, the parking, what's going to happen on the new Greenway Avenue. And it felt like you didn't take into consideration the fact that this is right near the Greenway and going to be right across the street from Trailhead Park, what's going to be Trailhead Park. And, you say the cars are going to be like an average of 4 minutes waiting, and that you can stack up to 10 cars and maybe even more. And I think about how much CO2 emissions that's going to create for people who are in that area to walk, to bike, to play in the park. So it's kind of a disappointing development for an area that's supposed to be like an open space enjoyment. And then I asked about bike parking because it is, the Greenway is a big biking area, and you tell me you have 6 bike spaces. So I just wanted to make that comment that you're putting this car-centric, at first I was kind of excited about having a cafe near, a pedestrian area and a park area, and only to find out that it's very car-centric. And as as somebody else, I think it was you, Jonathan, mentioned about the cars that are stacked up on 27, I've been past that, I've seen the traffic there, and I see how many cars idle there, and it's disappointing that it seemed like very little consideration was given to the fact that that is near a greenway and like I said, the future site of Trailhead Park. So that's my comment.
Let me just maybe make one comment. The redevelopment plan specifically contemplates this type of use at this location, and we complied with all of the impervious requirements, the landscaping requirements, the tree location requirements, and everything else. We provided an outdoor area. And in terms of focusing on the stacking, that was a big issue with DRC, and we understood that was an issue as well due to the proximity to the Edison. So we focused on the fact that this is how the site will work. In terms of providing crosswalks and access across to the trailhead, certainly we'll work with your professionals and the county to make sure that that works out. And in terms of it being car-centric, there's requirements for, whenever you have a use like this, there's requirements for stacking, there's requirements for parking that we have to meet. So we really don't have an option of providing less opportunities for parking and for stacking, because if we did, the site wouldn't function. So we're sort of a bit hamstrung by a lot of different requirements that we felt that we had to address. And in terms of the drive-through and this type of use, it's specifically designated for this parcel. Your redevelopment plan has different uses designated for different parcels. This contemplates either a restaurant or this type of use, specifically drive-through. So we felt like we balanced everything that we could balance, and I think obviously we've worked with your professionals and we'll continue to work with your professionals to address your concerns in terms of whatever additional screening or landscaping you think would enhance it. But you know, basically what we tried to do was design a site that worked. And that's why we focused on a lot of that. And those were the comments that come up in your professionals' reports that we had to address.
That's fine. I just wanted to get it on the record that this is near an open space recreational area, and no matter how much screening or buffering we do, the stacked up cars idling will affect the experience of the people in the green open space area. Thank you.
Okay. Are there board members that, did I see one comment?
No, is the walk-up window a new addition to Starbucks design?
Something that she's asking whether the walk-up window, when you come up, she's asking whether the walk-up window is a new addition to Starbucks.
It is.
And when did you implement it?
Just as the pandemic was occurring.
I'm sorry?
Just as the pandemic was occurring.
And you now have it at other locations?
We do.
And how does it work?
It works really well. Our customers are responding well. They like to sit out on a patio and walk up. Sort of like an ice cream store where you go up and you get an ice cream cone. They like to come up and get a frappuccino and sit down outside.
That's where you can easily see the walk-up window, and that's very curious. And to follow up on a comment, I mean, I would imagine we would get a lot of pedestrian traffic here because of people in Trailhead Park and using the greenway, the actual greenway. So I'm interested in hearing testimony about how pedestrians are going to be crossing 27 to get from Trailhead Park.
Well, our traffic engineer is going to talk about the intersection, about signalization, about crosswalks, and he can deal with pedestrian safety when he deals with the traffic safety issues.
Thank you.
Yes.
Just a question regarding signage. I know there's going to be additional testimony about signage, so I think I hold my questions regarding the waivers you're looking for.
Yeah, we're going to mark in the architecturals, the colored architectural, so you can see each sign and where it's located.
So I'll hold my question regarding
Sure.
regarding this topic of accessibility, walk-up and bike racks and things like that. Obviously, Starbucks is a very large company that has a lot of market research. But I think what you're hearing a bit from our community is perhaps, not that you didn't know, but perhaps you didn't factor in how use the greenway itself gets, and trailhead park right across the street. There's a lot of people who walk, a lot of people who ride bikes, and the presentation regarding the bikes specifically, just looking at it as a business person, if there's no bike racks, or there's 6 spots and you're gonna have on a nice Saturday or Sunday, you're gonna have 25 people on bikes wanting to get coffee. You know, I understand the councilwoman's concern is more of an environmental one, and certainly well thought, but I don't understand this sort of casual way you're talking about the bike rack. That maybe it has 6, we're not quite sure if it has 6. We don't know what the design is, maybe it'll be there, we wanna move it back a little. To me, that would be a real element, knowing the site and where it is. Perhaps in a different location, bike racks are less important, but where it is specifically, from a business perspective, I would think you guys would be really amenable to making a significant area available for people using the greenway, and people use the greenway by walking it and riding it. So, just to back up, from a different perspective perhaps, not necessarily an environmental perspective quite so much, but it seems like a tremendous opportunity that perhaps is being overlooked.
Bike racks are always at our stores in pedestrian-like environments, not in vehicular environments. Let's say if you were on a major highway, less likely for someone to ride, but we always want bike racks in our stores or on the property. So
And you would have no issue?
We have no issue with adding 1 or 2, whatever we need, and if it's safely placed, we're good with that.
So we'll make a representation that our engineer will work with your planner, come up with additional locations, and provide a number of bike racks that's accessible. And there probably could be, there's enough space, Mr. Wazowski, that if we found after we were operating that we needed more room, there's adequate area for additional bike racks?
Yes, for sure.
Yeah, so there's flexibility. Where would we put them, just so the board can see where they might go if necessary?
Additional spaces would be, additional space could be between the edge of the parking area and the northern edge of the building in this green area, or on the Greenway Avenue side of the store.
Work with our professional to come up to a...
Yeah, we have no problem with adding bikes.
Melissa, I noticed you've been motioned. Why don't you get your question?
Okay, I just wanted to ask a question in terms of your corporate model. In all cases, you mentioned before that you would have more bike racks in a non-vehicular environment. I'm assuming that definition of a non-vehicular environment would only be in a city type of situation. I'm trying to, and I'm also just wanting to go on the record and clarify. When Starbucks decides to put a new place somewhere, is it a requirement that you always have a drive-through?
No.
But where you expect to get cars, you put a drive-through in.
Correct, correct. We wouldn't do this unless we had a drive-through. We don't have drive-throughs in cities. So to answer that, truthfully, we open stores without drive-throughs in urban areas. But this site specifically was approved as a drive-through, otherwise we're not moving forward.
Thank you.
Okay. Other questions, board members, before we proceed? Okay. Let's move on with our testimony.
Okay, the architect, Mr. Blas.
Careful. I'm telling everybody. It's my job.
As long as I don't walk there, we're okay.
As long as I don't have to walk there, forget it. Ready? You swear or affirm the testimony that Mr.
Yes.
State your name for us and spell your last.
My name is Greg Blasi, and that's spelled B-L-A-S-I.
Mr. Pelosi, can you just give us a little bit of your professional background and qualifications?
Yes, I graduated in 1995 with a bachelor's in architecture and licensed since 2004. I'm from Westfield. I appeared in front of Westfield, Mountainside, Providence, Summit, Sour,
what it looks like.
And your license is in New Jersey?
Unless it's
correct?
in New Jersey,
Yes.
and other states.
Other states as
Welcome
well.
to the board, Mr. Fox.
Yeah, correct.
So, did you bring, you brought with you, or the first sheet, that was part of the submitted architecturals, correct?
Correct.
You haven't changed that at all?
No.
So we don't need to mark that as an exhibit, just for the record, identify what sheet it is of your submitted plans.
It's SD01.
And that's just a floor plan of the facility?
Yeah, it's a floor plan which indicates the 2,250 square feet of Starbucks use. It indicates 2 work rooms, 2 bathrooms, a male and a female, and an open space that was to be designed at a later time.
And that's what will include the seating area.
Correct.
And did you also bring with you the architectural elevations?
I did. Before I turn to them, I just want to also indicate the patio that is in facing Middlesex Road right here. This is the patio and the walk-in window. The first sheet is SD02.
And is that the same sheet that was submitted?
Yes, it's been rendered.
Okay, but it's been rendered, so let's mark that. Right. So, A3.
So,
explain what that shows.
So this plan indicates this is the front elevation, which is Middlesex Street, which indicates the sign logo, which is 60 inches, which is 9.6 square feet. And another sign, which is 7 square feet, which is 311 by 1'9".
And that's the little one you just identified, says drive-through?
Correct.
It doesn't have any logo or any identification sign, it just indicates the drive-through.
Correct.
Direction.
Correct. And then the materials are a dark stucco, dark metal flat trim, and wood siding. And there will be gray brick, which you'll see on other elevations. You'll only see a minor amount of the brick in the front elevation, which is right here. Moving to the next elevation, which is the rear elevation. There's a service door in this location, which is not a general entrance, it's just a service door. There's tongue and groove siding on the lower portion of the building. There is the gray stucco on the top. There's 2 signs. One is a Starbucks lettered sign, which is 27 square feet, which is 1 foot 8 inches high by 16 foot 3 inches long.
So that's the sign that needs the variance for maximum width and for maximum area, correct?
Correct. And then, similar to the front elevation, a drive-through sign, which is 7 square feet, which is 3 foot 11 quarters by 1 foot 9, which is right here.
And this exhibit now, this is now A4, correct? This
Correct.
would be A4, this would be the additional colored element, red.
The next page would be A4. This would be A4.
Craig, just keep your voice up for me, please.
Sure. This would be A4.
I got that, thank you.
All right, so this is the right side elevation. It has a suspended canopy. It has aluminum, dark aluminum trim. It has 2 signs on it. Well, it has dark aluminum trim. It has the same stucco that's on the front, which is dark stucco, and it has wood siding. Now discussing the signs, it has a Starbucks logo sign, which is 60 inches in diameter, 19.6 square feet, right here in the center.
And that's the sign, those logo signs are the ones that exceed the height of the sign when measured. It's 5 feet as opposed to the 3 feet maximum, correct?
Correct.
Okay, thank you.
And it also has a secondary sign, which is another drive-through sign indicating where the drive-through.
And again, that has no logo or advertising, it just says drive-through with an arrow.
Correct.
Thank you.
The canopy is 9'4" high, and basically that is this elevation. The last elevation is the left side elevation, which is Factory Street. So it has the same gray stucco up top, it has gray brick at the bottom, it has a dark metal trim, wood siding, it has a drive-through. The drive-through is right here with the canopy. Canopy is 9'10" clear in height. The sign is another logo sign, Starbucks logo sign, which is 60 inches, which again is 19.6 square feet. I think that is the only sign on this elevation.
I don't have any other questions.
I'm sorry. Oh.
I'm sorry, Ms. Clarkson, Ms. Clarkson, I'm sorry, I'm having a hard time hearing you.
Just asking Mr. Blasi if there is a rendering of the facade of the building that faces Middlesex and that faces Greenpoint.
So Middlesex is the front, this is, which is indicated, it's number 1, front elevation. This is Middlesex Road.
Right.
Middlesex,
Avenue.
Colored in.
It's partially colored in on this side, which would, so the gray stucco, this gray here would go across the top, the gray stucco.
Right.
The metal trim will be dark, and then which a darker gray, very close. Some brick will be a small amount of brick will be seen, which actually is the wall on the drive-through side, and then you'll have wood coming through. There is this dotted line, this hidden line is indicating the railing that is in front of the seating.
Right, I understand. I guess I was asking if a rendition that's completely colored. Okay.
Is now the appropriate time to discuss the waiver for signage?
Sure.
Can you discuss a little bit why you need a waiver, why you need such a large sign? And we have ordinances in the borough, they apply to all businesses. Why is Starbucks special? They need a 5-foot sign, really only a 3, but it's not required waiver.
Well, in terms of the logo signs, the 5 feet, I think if you could address that, it's designed for visibility.
Yeah, but I would, as I look at the facade, if you look at the size of the sign here compared to the overall facade, it's not taking up much room. And actually, not only for visibility, just in the scale of the building, because any smaller it would almost disappear into the scale of the building. So if I look at even the side elevation, so I believe the Starbucks that's lettered in the back is a perfect scale for that building. But if we look at the elevations, the longer elevations as well, and it's smaller, it would almost be out of scale with the facade of the building, where this is a middle of the road of architecturally what I would indicate a larger sign if I could, but this is a way in which it doesn't look out of place on the facade, but it's readable from distance.
You think a smaller sign would not look appropriate?
I think it started looking, it was almost if it was the wrong size sign for the scale of the building.
And I didn't see the comments from all professionals regarding that waiver request.
Part of the reason why I was sort of silent on the signage exceptions being requested because frankly, this is the first time I'm seeing the sign. The package that was given to me had generic coffee shop signage. And that was the same, so that would address that issue. But if you have any specific comments or questions they want me to address for any specific signage, I can go through one at a time. So I think there's different issues at play.
Well, from the architect gentleman testifying, saying that a sign would comply, the ordinance would not be Starbucks door just visually would not be as pleasing, I think it's fair to say, as testimony. There's nothing to have about his testimony. What are your feelings about it?
So, in my professional opinion, again, there's a few things in place. I'm going to answer in different ways. Some of them you may obviously not agree, but others you may. So I'm going to look at it in terms of prior applications that's come before this board at this particular site. We did have some signage exceptions related to the Everbrook. They were actually some substantially larger signs. Part of that's due because of the setback from Durham Avenue. When this board approved the hub project, Whole Foods, the 80 apartments, and the probably over 25,000 square feet, we did customize the approval to allow for much bigger signage than the underlying ordinance requires. If you go through the ordinance requirements, they are, if you read the dimensions and try to really understand the proportions of the building, they really apply to a walkable Main Street, narrow buildings, small storefronts. This is a little bit different. I wouldn't want to say it's a highway oriented because that's not what we want here necessarily. So we're sort of looking at this in between a rural/highway and an urban condition. With respect to the specific waivers, I will first talk about the size, maximum 24 square feet for wall-mounted sign. There is only one that requires relief, and that's 27 square feet, which is not, I would say, probably less than around a 10% deviation, but we've been allowing that as of right with this recent ordinance amendment by allowing deviations of certain signage provisions up to 10%, actually might be up to 25%, provided it goes through a site plan exemption review. So there's actually precedent to allow for some deviation, provided that all other features of the building complies. With regards to the height, there's 3 signs that require 5 feet. That sounds like a lot, but when you look at the wall-mounted sign provisions, it's contemplating a rectangular area. So limited to 3 feet height, 12 feet width. Within that, it's 36 square feet. You could fit a 24 square foot sign. Despite the fact that this is a 5-foot sign, the fact that it is circular, or if it is square, like the other business, it does not read as large because the area is limited. In fact, the area is conforming. With respect to the architect's comments about it being not lost in the building, I would tend to agree that the sign appears to be proportioned to the facade of the building. That's also the spacing between the top of the sign, top of the building, bottom of the sign, and top of the canopy. I think the way it's designed on the building side, it is appropriate, and it won't be a detriment if the ordinance was interpreted literally and enforced literally. The other exception is the width of 16 feet. I think that's the Starbucks written out on the rear facade. Again, similar to the other projects that the borough's approved, or this board has approved, particularly the gateway area, the hub project, we did allow for much wider signage provisions. And of course, they comply because we have customized signage provisions. And when we wrote the redevelopment plan for this particular site, we did not have an opportunity to really think about specific wall-mounted signage. We might do it a little bit differently because the underlying provisions are more appropriate for a tight, walkable, pedestrian, Main Street style small buildings. Because you want the signs to take up the whole building. In fact, in the hub project, we had an allowance. The area was sort of limited to not more than 10% of the facade, which is a common requirement in many communities that update their signage ordinance. And this is far under 10%, which is, I think something that the board could address through the exception. I don't think there's any really major issue with the proposed signage, only because it's designed, in my opinion, designed in proportion to the facade. It doesn't read as overbearing on the There's also some other minor exceptions related to the number of signs, because there's a fourth sign, which is because of the 4 faces of the building. Not that much different than the building with the Chipotle, Luigi's ice cream building. Again, part of the there's 4 sides to it, and no one's around it. The other issue, so to speak, is where you put the directional signs to drive through. the ordinance has a requirement or provisions that allow for up to 3 directional signage in a parking lot. In this case, basically putting it on the building. I really don't have any major objections to that request because those signs are small, not quite 4 square feet, which is really small in building a facade like that. Might not be so I think the signage exceptions being requested are reasonable with the because of the scale.
The bathrooms, they're single cell bathrooms, correct?
There are two handicap bathrooms, single cell, yeah.
Why are they gendered
Well,
then?
they're-
I'm sorry, why are they gendered? It just doesn't seem like you need to have a men's and a women's bathroom to just have two in the same.
There are two handicap bathrooms.
You really, I'm advised by Starbucks representative, if you want to leave them both gender neutral, we can do that. That's not an issue. It's whatever, it really doesn't matter.
Personally, to me, that seems like a smart idea. That's just for me. But thank you.
Board members, questions or comments for this witness? Okay, does that complete his testimony?
It does.
Okay, so let's move on to traffic.
Sure, traffic engineer.
Mr. Griffin also having, I don't mind the mask, I'm sorry, but I just need you to. I'm sorry, oh, the court report, I'm sorry, I didn't understand. I will try and speak up.
I'll just use the exhibits that are already presented.
Do you swear or affirm that the testimony that you're about to give this proceeding will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
State your full name for us, spell your last name.
John Harder, Harter.
Mr. Harder, what firm are you affiliated with?
Principal Atlantic Traffic and Design Engineering.
And can you give us your qualifications? You can take this off.
Yes. Is it catching me like this? Is it all right? Leave it there? Pretty good. But I will, if it's good here, I can read my notes better. Principal Atlantic Traffic and Design Engineering. I've been here 27 years since graduating from Lehigh University with a Bachelor of Science in Civil Engineering. I'm licensed in this state and several others. And I've testified in Metuchen many years ago and been accepted here in more than 150 municipalities in New Jersey as a traffic expert.
Welcome to the board, Mr. Harder. We will accept you as an expert.
So, Mr. Harder, you've been involved in preparing the traffic impact assessment, dealing with issues of warrants for signalization and circulation and the overall design of Greenway Avenue, correct?
Yes, that's correct.
And you've been working together with the engineers at Bowler and with the applicant's team to address those issues?
Yes.
And in the course of the past week, you've also been working with the traffic engineer from Collier to address issues that were raised in their report, correct?
Yes, Jeff Fiore of Colliers.
Okay, so can you just give us an overall explanation of what you did in terms of what you looked at, what kind of accounts you took, and how you analyzed the site, for starters?
Sure, I'll go through it. So our study was holistic. We're looking at not just Starbucks, but the Sportsplex, and then assuming all 5 of the different parcels are developed. And so the report is far-reaching and holistic for the whole property. We conducted traffic counts in 2020 in October, and on a weekday in October in the evening, morning and evening period. So studying 6 to 9 in the morning, 4 to 6 in the evening, and then also a Saturday, October 10th, from 11 in the morning to 2 p.m. So the idea is to capture the peak times for all the uses where they may potentially peak, so the commuter hours on a weekday and then Saturday midday. Those counts were done under COVID, so we did look into an adjustment factor to increase those volumes. They were increased by roughly 10.5%. That was done by looking at historical DOT counts from 2018, 2019 within the road network. We had studied 8 intersections beyond just the site access points, so really 10 locations altogether. And that includes locations, I can run through all of them if you'd like. Grid Street and John Street, which is a coupled signalized intersection on New Durham Road. We then studied Oliver Street, a small side street as you continue east, and then to Middlesex Avenue Memorial Parkway, which is an unusual angle intersection. Our site access, which today, as you know, on Middlesex Avenue, really has almost no volume since the bank is vacant there. Continuing east, we studied Central Avenue and a couple signalized intersections, Middlesex Avenue and Lake Avenue, Route 27, and then just adjacent to the municipal building, Main Street and Route 27 as well. And one other, I missed one last intersection, Steve, Central and Durham Avenue as well.
Okay, thank you. So, and have you been involved in looking at the intersection that's proposed, the Greenway Avenue and Middlesex, focusing on that?
Yes, so to account for the full build out of the site, we had done those counts under COVID, so the Sportsplex was clearly underrepresented. So we used ITE, or Institute of Transportation Engineers, estimates for 6 different land uses to assume a full build out as I indicated. I talked to Mr. Fiore, he agreed with the process and methodology of those estimates. And after doing that, we then came up with a distribution. The site obviously will change now that we'll have a connecting roadway, municipal roadway between Durham Avenue to the north and Middlesex Avenue. We had made an assumption of roughly a 50% distribution to both roadways for site traffic. And ultimately, Mr. Fiore's review that recently came out suggested that the volume should be weighted more to Middlesex Avenue and based on the 2-way volumes that in the peak hours. So when I look at those, the 3 different peak hours, that roughly comes out to about 63% on Middlesex Avenue and the remaining 37% up at Durham Avenue.
Yeah, okay, so based on that now, your original analysis didn't find the warrant for a signalized intersection was met. Has your opinion of that changed now based on the redesign, your discussions with the board, and the change in the distribution?
Yes, so for 2 reasons. The warrants were very close, so a little background on warrants. So traffic signal warrants come from the Manual on Uniform Traffic Control Devices. It's a Federal Highway Administration publication. It gives us guidance, traffic engineers, planners, on regulatory signs that you see on the road, pavement marking, so there's consistency. And there are roughly a dozen warrants for traffic signals. In this case, we're focused on volume warrants for traffic, not there are other ones based on accident history, school crossings, that type of thing. So when we looked at the peak hour warrant, we were just under warning a signal. 2 reasons we now expect that it would be warranted. The first is the distribution, a higher distribution to Middlesex Avenue would help with the warrant. And then secondarily, there was a discussion earlier about Greenway Avenue and how the current plan now shows a single lane. The prior design provided a short right turn lane that could stack just 2 cars, it was 50 feet long. The way the warrants work, there are different thresholds for meeting, satisfying the warrant or not. And when you have 2 lanes on a side street, you require more volume to meet a warrant. So by going to a single lane, which we're now proposing, we actually would meet the warrants even based on my distribution for the peak hour.
And that's even going to be greater now that you're changing the distribution. So it's a
Correct.
stronger argument for warranting the single.
Correct. I also talked to Mr. Fiore about bolstering our case for the county is to look at the other 2 volume warrants. There's a 4-hour warrant and an 8-hour, so you're looking at longer periods of time and looking at different thresholds with those warrants.
And so what you're representing tonight is you're going to redo your analysis based on your discussions with Mr. Fiore, and then work with the consultants at Kaiers, including Mr. Fiore, to try to convince the county to put some.
That's correct. Right, and by signalizing, I think it's very good for obviously traffic control and safety, but pedestrian benefits are obviously clear as well. By the signal would have, I would anticipate four signal poles at the corners with pedestrian signal heads, countdown timers, actuation, push buttons as appropriate, so and crosswalks with the ladder tech crosswalks that we were discussing
Yes,
earlier.
so if the county agrees that a signal was warranted at that location, you would design a signal the way you just described it.
That's correct.
With all the pedestrian features.
That's correct. And the other pedestrian item that I think that it was raised briefly.
A couple of questions here.
Sure. Just the fact that we removed the right turn lane, I agree with the planner may have said that, that shortens the crossing for pedestrians across Greenway Avenue, which is a benefit. Yes?
Does pedestrian volume factor into what the county will be considering? And have you done any kind of study of pedestrian volume there? Based on what Councilwoman Kozlowski said previously?
We haven't, and I guess normally we would count pedestrians in detail, but right now, since our site is really dormant, we're not seeing much volume. The trail crossing east of us we would, but we're really going to draw more pedestrians now once the development's in place. So in this case, we don't have pedestrian counts. They would be looking for vehicles to warrant the signal rather than pedestrians.
But then pedestrians would benefit from this?
Yes, clearly.
So then as this application has evolved, you started out perhaps not requiring a warrant or a traffic signal, but now you've decided that probably would be how you're going to come to the county. You are going to propose that a signal be installed.
That's correct. So we expect we're going to redo our study. I preliminarily looked at what Mr. Fiore asked for with the redistribution. That would contribute to meeting the warrant. And then again, going from 2 lanes on the side street with a minor approach to 1 brings down the threshold requirements for volumes. And that will, we need it for the peak hour. Now we need to look at the other warrants because the county may say, we want to see more backup or more warrants met potentially.
And I assume the county will take into consideration the fact that there are 4 other lots being developed.
I'm sorry, what kind of lots? 4?
I assume that the county is going to take into consideration the fact that the other 4 lots exist off of this
Yes.
street will be developed.
Those are part of your analysis, correct?
They are included in his
They are.
report. He's allowing for them now.
Yes.
And the other thing that you're going to do, which you started to do when you talked to the county initially, is include the borough's consultants in all of your discussions with the county.
That's correct.
So the borough's consultants will be a part of the process.
Thank you.
But it's important for the board to understand that what we're essentially doing is we're building a case for the traffic signal. And so what Mr. Cantor immediately, what I think his testimony just was, that just by eliminating that lane without changing the distribution, he already knows he has satisfied 1 volume. So they want to try and get all 3 if we can, because just because we have warrants for a traffic signal doesn't mean the county's going to install a traffic signal. it's not automatic. And there's complications with the signal location, is that correct, Mr. Cantor?
Mr. John Harder.
Oh,
Mr. Harder.
Harder.
Harder. I guess yes, Mr. Manager was asking whether there's complications specific to this location for the traffic signal.
Relative to the location of other traffic signals?
Correct. The county will be considering the proximity of other locations. We had a pre-application discussion with the county, the borough was on that as well, and the county was even brought up the idea of signalizing Memorial Parkway, Middlesex, and that location. So that's something that was on their mind, but we're gonna be providing documentation for signalization here.
Right.
Can I just ask a question? If we were to approve this application, and then the county decided not to put a traffic light there, that's a possibility. Is that true?
Yes,
Like if
it's
we
a
can approve this, and they
possibility.
could still say, we're not going to put a traffic light there, and then we would be left with the repercussions of the added traffic without the traffic control. Is that what I'm to understand?
Yes. Yes, it's not automatic, but because we have a traffic report that says there's warrants for the signal, then county's going to agree to allow a signal to be built.
Okay.
It's not guaranteed.
It's not guaranteed.
What we've done is
Thank you.
we've essentially come up with a plan that substantially complies with the redevelopment plan. This is what's intended for the site, and we've agreed to give you your traffic engineer to work with them and to coordinate with the borough to do our absolute best to get these signals. We would like to see a signal as well. Yeah, and we're going to be working with the borough. So if ultimately the county doesn't agree, it's going to not be due to any lack of trying, believe me.
What's the timing that you think?
What do you think, John, in terms of the timing of the county?
Well, Bowler just formally submitted an application. We'll be revising our study in the next few weeks, so we would submit to the borough. I don't know if we'd like the borough to review the report first.
I think so. I think
in advance.
what I'd like you to do is have Colliers look at the revised study first, and then they can collaborate, and then you can submit it to the county. We can put our best foot forward.
We have all the data, so that's the good thing. So it's a matter of going through those steps.
Okay. We're back at your testimony, sir.
I don't have any other.
Okay, so let's ask board members if they have specifically other questions for this witness first. Okay, I'm going to say no. And that concludes your testimony. So we have the issues of the manager's memo and the engineer's memo, a lot of which has already been addressed.
Certainly.
Thank you.
Well, that's good. Where's Robert? Where's he at? Where are you? Mr. Renaud. Hello, Mr. Renaud.
I'm listening.
Okay. As far as opening the public portion, do we not want to complete the engineers, give our professionals an opportunity to speak to the applicant's professions first? I'd like to open the public portion. Correct.
You're going to do, what do you have, just the planner left?
We don't have.
Oh, okay. Then we're done, right?
Yes.
Oh, okay, yeah, sure. Let's do our professionals go over their reports or comments or whatever.
Which has been addressed in different ways throughout the course of the application, so that's why I'm leaving it to them to bring up what they feel is relevant that hasn't been addressed. Chris, would you like to go first?
Sure. First, I would just recommend that the board, the applicant has requested for a waiver of submission requirements for little minor things like a 3D rendering of the entire thing. Sorry. The applicant is requesting a relief from some of the checklist requirements for a site plan submission, and they're pretty minor in nature, so I recommend that they be approved. Going into the plan review comments, this is starting with section 8 on page 5. I believe the application for development you will revise as needed. Just a couple minor things.
Certainly.
Business operations have been addressed. Drive-through facility has been addressed. I do want to comment on the design of the drive-through that sort of was born out of a sketch that he had done. What we're trying separate the drive-through loop away from the parking area, which is quite a big problem. The other facility has those users have to drive through a parking lot, and then there's only 6 spaces. So we intentionally drew that concept, and we're pleased to hear that Starbucks management obviously thought it was a good plan, and obviously having a larger lot was conducive to allowing that to happen. With respect to the connected roadway, it looks like obviously right turn lane was eliminated. I think that provides for a nicer streetscape. The question as to whether or not you want to have that on-street parking, in my opinion, I think we should certainly consider on-street parking. It adds the opportunity for an object in the street to protect the pedestrian use of the sidewalk, but also has additional opportunities for parking, especially for walk-up traffic and pickup orders, provided those are coming in from the Durham Avenue direction. Crosswalks have been addressed. The separation of the drive-through and enclosure has been addressed. I believe we addressed the waiver request. The applicant indicated that when the parcel D application comes forward, it will essentially take care of the existing screening. The buffer is not an issue because it's got hundreds of feet of buffer. That lot line doesn't exist yet. With regards to the trash enclosure, I just had one question. Maybe I missed it, but the detail on the plan showed a hollow block construction. My recommendation is that it should be finished with some sort of high-quality material consistent with the building or the freestanding wall.
Yes.
Yes, you agree?
Yes, we will comply or agree.
Thank you. Regarding the outdoor patio, I had just a general comment that I would encourage the applicant to look at pergolas, poles, and string lights. I would like the approval to allow for that flexibility and not trigger some sort of site plan approval. It's not a requirement, it's just an allowance for consideration.
How did you say, you said pergolas?
Pergolas, posts, and string lights. At the applicant's option, of course.
Stuart? Just stop the road. It's great. It's up to Starbucks. Starbucks said it's up to you. All right, it appears that we can, we'll work with your plan on that.
To be clear, that it's not a request, it's just saying I think you should be thinking about it.
Yeah.
It's something you should
Yeah,
consider.
we'll look at it, absolutely.
Retaining wall, I might have missed this, but gives me a large expanse. At some point, it's over 20 feet tall. The recommendation was that perhaps some murals, vignettes, paintings, obviously not signage, be considered on that large expanse, which may require rethinking some of the landscaping, something to think about.
You wouldn't have an objection if a local artist or a local artist group collective wanted to do something, obviously subject to it being, appropriate. We would just want to look at the design. But if you wanted to have somebody local work on a mural design and present it to us, we'd certainly consider it. I don't think we have any problem with the mural.
Yeah, and that can be facilitated because this is more than likely to be precast or concrete construction, not a Allen block construction, it's a rough finish.
Because of its location and size, you're right, it's likely going to be a concrete base.
We'd have no problem with that.
The EV, I'm going to punt on that, we'll come back to that last. Bicycle parking, I think Councilman Kuskowski brought up a good point. Redevelopment plan only calls for 2, but obviously it's great interest being that it is opposite the trailhead park, adjacent to a trailhead. Frankly, maybe we should have asked for more bicycle parking in the redevelopment plan, but it doesn't sound like you're objecting.
We have no objection. And we'll work with you on locating additional bicycle parking, not a problem.
And if I could just clarify the testimony I had before, I apologize for seeing the waiver on the number. It was just because I didn't remember the exact detail. The detail element plan calls for 10 spaces in a rack. But Chris correctly pointed out that the space we have it in is probably not the optimal space, so we will find a space to locate it, and if the board does determine they want more spaces in it, that's okay too.
We address signage. I think the only comment, again, it's not my report because I reacted to it, but will they be internally illuminated?
The signage?
Yes.
Yes.
And if it's typical like other Starbucks signage, it's not like a cabinet sign box with a white background. it's going to be sort of like a large channel letter. It's going to glow through.
So I can probably try to answer that. The logo is backlit. It's a panel. The drive-through chevrons, I believe, are backlit too. There isn't anything that's lit in another way on site that I believe, because everything else would be a sign.
Yeah, it doesn't read as a older style cabinet design with a white background. This is more modern. There's color to it, interests. So I have no objection to that. So it's coordinated details and lumens.
Yep.
I didn't hear anything about building designs, sustainable design. I was just curious what strategies were you going to implement?
No, there's nothing in particular with that in terms of the site design.
We have the filtration units, as I mentioned, as part of the stormwater management strategy. The site is an environmental cap, so we have to minimize the amount of infiltration or bioretention type stuff that we have. So we chose those units that are self-contained.
With respect to the building design, I would have liked more information, but by virtue of being a new building, more than likely, just by default, you're going to hit at least 10 of those strategies, like high efficiency equipment, low flow toilets, and faucets.
Architect can confirm that. We're going to have that. And talk about the design features.
So the things that I will discuss is the heating system, as you already said, will be a high efficiency heating system. Insulation regulations are now much higher, so the building will be a much tighter building to keep the heat and air conditioning in. So the systems, the mechanical systems will be highly efficient.
And are you pursuing any rating system certification like WELL or LEED?
No.
So we can work on making sure we hit some of the strategy. I don't think they're hard reaches, but by virtue of being a new building, it should be difficult to achieve. Going back to this is my last comment. Going back to the electrical vehicle, so I've had conversations with the state. There is sort of a issue with what retailers mean. Obviously, it's intended to be a uniform code throughout the state. It's sort of a frustrating thing for me to deal with. It's like, what does retailer mean? And the comment I received was, well, it's probably retailer, just retail uses, but it's also a comment was raised, as Mr. Trippett indicated, that it could also be whatever the common literature explains. So there's this disconnect between the definition of retailer and what the intention was. So to be frank, it's not clear to me whether or not the EV requirements apply here. Normally, it's one space for up to 50 spaces. You need one, but if you have 25 or less for a retailer, is exempt. That's not clear at the moment. What the board could do is make a finding that this is a retailer, and hopefully in the next year or so, that rule changes are coming from the state to clarify that. I know there's going to be a bunch of things they're going to be doing, but that's sort of a hanging item out there, whether or not there will be an EV station.
Am I correct in gleaning from what you're saying that even though the technical definition may not be exactly where you want to be, as a professional, it's your desire to see an EV charging station on site?
It would.
Is that something that is going to be?
Well, I mean, we will do it if it's required, but we think that in terms of the rationale for retail, you're dealing with in and out short-term traffic. So that's why they're thinking if it's less than 25 spaces and it's retail, you don't need it. We have 17 or 16 spaces, and this is a use where people aren't going to be there for a particularly long period of time. That's why we feel it's probably not necessary, but if the board insists, one will be provided.
One other option is to reach back out to the state and just ask, do restaurants and drive-thrus fall into that retail?
And it's very flexible on your part, so I think that's goodwill.
If there's further reach out and there's further guidance from the state, we would abide by that.
I would even say, even if they say no, I would still personally like to see, professional opinion, like to see it's just one.
The number on record said that they would love to do that, Chris, so they don't have one time.
I will. That'll be fine. One last I think there was one last exception actually I forgot to mention. Landscaping on Factory Street. Technically, yes, the ordinance requires street trees be planted 30, 35 feet on center average. The redevelopment plan really wasn't dealing with the financial condition on Factory Street, and frankly, that portion of the street is really functioned as a parking lot for this adjacent daycare facility. So I have no objection to the street trees not being required along Factory Street.
Thank you, Chris.
The only other thing, excuse me, I wanted to clarify with your planner before we finish, is in terms of the maximum setback, we're at 28.6 feet based on the alignment. And I just wanted your, whether or not you had any issues with that. We really don't think we can't do that one-lane design without somewhat of a deviation, unless there's something you think we could do.
I guess I'll answer in two parts. When you consider the on-street parking, the curb edge that is brought in, what's that distance?
Less than 20 feet, then it complies, but it doesn't comply at the, the corner.
Correct. So the maximum setback is not intended to be strung along the entire facade. It's just whatever that minimum distance is, as long as it doesn't exceed 25 feet, it will be in compliance. So if you do have that on-street parking, you would be in compliance. Correct. If we pull back on on-street parking, then yes, you would need a bulk variance.
Correct.
And I would say it's under the C2 flexible C.
Yeah.
So,
I would say grant the variance if, after review and further coordination of the site plan, if the borough does not want to see on-street parking, then you have the variance.
They would have to come back.
I would prefer not to have to come back.
I think we could deal with that in the resolution, so we wouldn't have to come back.
Recognizing Ms. Perelstein's comments about on-street parking, I don't want to make a final decision on whether or not there's on-street parking or not. So.
That's fine. I mean, for the record, whatever the ultimate decision is, with further review with Mr. Cosenza and your engineer, if it ends up with parking, we'll provide the spaces. If a decision is made that the spaces shouldn't be there, we'll eliminate them. And then we would need the variance, correct?
Because that's where you specify you have the right to provide. Okay.
No other comments.
Questions for Chris based on his review of his notes? Okay. Mr. Mannix, did you,
could you go through page 2 of our memo and the general comments, item 3, like the overall approach to constructing the project is not just involving the Starbucks site, so to speak. You have to build the road and the infrastructure of the road as well, right?
Yes. Yep. The road infrastructure, at the very least, up to the end of the Starbucks, plus the drainage system is being proposed.
So I think the staging areas will be on a lot that's behind Starbucks for both contractors. Should there be two?
Yes, but I couldn't, because we don't know the status of the construction of either of those lots, or when they're going to happen, or if it's the same contractor or not. So I couldn't comment for 100% certain now exactly.
Well, it's a lot that's immediately adjoining. Not referring to daycare. Referring to.
Yeah, the one, because at some point that's subject to redevelopment too, and there'll be a planning board application on that, and I'm not really sure of the timing. Because with or without that lot, I think, the Starbucks, as they normally can in a 0.76 acre lot on the site like this.
We're going to want the road built.
The road, sure. The road, yes. The road, sure. I didn't mean as far as
slightly ahead of the Starbucks, so the infrastructure.
the road and the infrastructure there would have to be correct. I was just meaning the staging of the site itself and moving of soil and the building of the retaining wall. That stuff could all be contained within the site itself.
Okay. All right. And then item 4, when we had the board members may remember when the daycare project was here, the applicant brought in the LSRP that's overseeing all the contamination on this property, not just the individual lots. So they will employ the services of the LSRP as your daycare facility to oversee this project. This is a small area of this piece of property that is. So that was just the one, just get that on the record. I believe we covered all the traffic items, or they will be covered. Calculations and report are revised. Under site considerations, I don't think there's anything here that you would have heartburn over and agreeing with. How about, did you cover where the HVAC equipment will be? Is that going to be up on the roof or is it going to be on the ground? On the roof and screen?
Just come forward.
Yeah, the HVAC is rooftop units that are on the roof.
Okay.
So is there anything in the letter that you can't comply with?
No.
Left in the letter?
No.
Okay.
No, we're good with,
Okay.
with everything that's in that letter.
Other than I want to reinforce that the whole traffic signal is not guaranteed. You're, all we have is a report that says we should get. Don't want any of the board members.
But that's not within our, right?
Correct.
My old proofs, it's still up to the county.
The borough obviously will heavily lobby the county for it. And it's a weapon to use, get you in the door to have a legitimate conversation.
Although it's beyond our control, we would not have an objection to a condition in the resolution that reinforces everything we said about working with the borough's consultants, keeping the borough consultants in the entire process, supporting the traffic light, and providing the borough's consultants with additional studies and analyses that back it up in the way we've discussed.
Yeah, certainly should the application should succeed, we would hope the county would find their wisdom, given the proximity to the agreement going on.
It's apparently something that's been, everybody's been hearing there's a signal coming, I guess, for 10 years and telling each other that, right? Like everybody thinks it's been coming already, right?
Right. That does concern me greatly because we could approve this application, this thing gets built with the drive-through, and then we don't have the, like, as I said before, the traffic calming control that we need to manage what I will imagine will be more traffic to this particular site. And I'm just wondering if it's possible to hold off on voting on this particular application until we find out the county is going to install the traffic light.
Well, that's for the board members to decide.
We obviously, from our perspective, we need a decision to go forward because we've designed the site. The relief requested is, again, the only deviation is to accommodate a design change from your planner. All of the other waivers have to do with the underlying signage, and the screening was essentially temporary in nature, and the crosswalk was just to be consistent, so the relief is very de minimis. These plans substantially comply, and it's the use that your ordinance and your redevelopment plan dictates for the site. So I think from our perspective, what we're willing to do is work with the borough to try to get a signal, but if we can't get a signal, we expect this project to go forward. Because this is what is called for in your redevelopment plan. And again, we're completely behind you in terms of getting a signal, but if we can't get a signal, it's really beyond our control.
Again, just to clarify, Mr. Mattis, you concluded other than that, anything else you want to touch on before we end?
That's it.
I just wanted to say that I'm not suggesting that we shouldn't approve the project. I'm suggesting that we hold off on considering it until we know whether or not there's going to be a traffic signal approved. Because I understand what you're saying. I do understand that it complies with the redevelopment. However, it will be the town that's left with the traffic problem. If you'll build the Starbucks, if we consider the application tonight, you'll build the Starbucks. We do or don't get the traffic. If we don't get the traffic signal, the town is still left with the problems that are going to be created by not having the traffic signal in what is largely passive recreation area. So I just would urge the board to take that under consideration as we move forward in this and considering this application.
I feel like we're getting a little bit into the discussion part and we haven't opened it it up to the public yet. I think you need to have the public's questions and comments before we start talking about what to do with the application.
So again, we're done with our comments from Mr. Maddox, and the board has any questions from Mr. Maddox? We don't have any at this moment. Then we're okay, Bob. Again, questions, statements, how would you like?
Let's do it the same way we did with the other one. If people have questions or comments, come on up, we'll swear you in. You can make your comments, questions, whatever you want to do.
Okay, so with that, we'll formally open the public portion, and come up, give us your name, your address, and
My name is Peter Fairclough. I live at Finkelwood Place.
Hold it, just slow that down and start.
Yeah. Peter Fairclough, Everson Fox, AIRCLOUGH.
And your address?
3 Goodwill Place, Metuchen. So it's
Hold
been-
on. You swear or affirm that the testimony you're about to give in this proceeding will be the truth, nothing but the truth?
So this is going to be a drive-through with potentially 10 cars in a row. I wonder if Starbucks has done anything to measure what the local quality of the local air quality might be. And is there mitigation that people do that?
That hasn't been, that's really not a land use issue. It has not been analyzed.
Is there intention to do anything like that?
Not at this
citizens?
Not at this time. I don't think there's any intent to look at that at this time.
What would that do to the air quality in the seating area outside?
Again, the seating area has been provided. It's an outdoor seating area. We don't expect it to be an issue, but you know, the cars will be there. If you know, when the cars are there, it's just a given of this type of use. I don't know any other way to answer that.
I like the idea of the crosswalk. Sorry, the traffic light there. I've seen many pedestrian close calls as people try to cross the greenway, going from one side to the next avenue to the other. The traffic light there, I think, would be absolutely essential. Because you will get a lot of traffic from the park going across the next avenue for that home. That's it.
Swear you in for this one. Raise your right hand. You swear or affirm that the testimony you're about to give in this proceeding will be the truth, nothing but the truth.
Yes, sir, I do.
Give me your name, please.
Charles Cradaville, Kratovil.
Ready? Go ahead.
Thank you. Just want to say to the board that I very much do appreciate the opportunity to address you. I can tell you all take this work very seriously, and I appreciate you taking my point seriously. I do have some questions. Wanted to ask what input or involvement, if any, has the Environmental Commission had on this application? Okay, fair enough. Appreciate the honesty. I do want to submit for the record the same letter or attachments.
Thank you. We'll file that with the board secretary.
Appreciate it. And I will direct the board to page 3 of the attachment from AMJAC. In this case, different section of the MLUL I'd like to cite. It says, quote, whenever the Environmental Commission has prepared and submitted to the Planning Board and the Board of Adjustment an index of the natural resources of the municipality, the Planning Board or the Board of Adjustment shall make available to the Environmental Commission an informational copy of every application for development submitted to either board. It's my understanding that the Metuchen Environmental Commission has submitted an ERI, an Environmental Resources Inventory, which would then entitle them to have the Planning Board share with them, or in this case, make available to them an informational copy of every application for development that's submitted. I just want to ask if that happened in this case, if they had, you know, if an informational copy of this application had been shared with the Environmental Commission.
All applications are available, they're all on the borough's website.
Okay. Do you know if there was any specific effort to share it with the Environmental Commission?
I do not.
Okay. I do just want to, you know, for the record, put my objection to the board being constituted without a member of the Environmental Commission tonight. I'm pretty sure you're not, your opinion hasn't changed since earlier this evening, but I do want to just put on the record that I do object on those grounds. And one final point before I'll wrap up. I would like to learn more. The mayor recused due to a personal conflict. I wanted to ask if anybody can articulate what the conflict is and if it's appropriate for the mayor's designee to still participate in and or vote on this application.
Yes, the mayor's designee doesn't have any conflict.
Okay, fair enough. I'll just state for the record, I've been to other planning boards where the mayor's designee is recused based on a conflict involving the mayor. Perhaps they were being extra cautious there, but notwithstanding the mayor's impassioned speech on the last one and Mr. Renaud's legal lesson, I do hope that some positive changes will come out of the points I've raised today. I am, taking time out of my day to be here because I do care about the environment and I care about good government, and I think that government works best when the different boards and commissions communicate and work together, and I hope that in the future there'll be improved communication. And thank you for hearing me out.
Any members of the public would like to participate this evening? Man, I'm not seeing any. I'm going to go ahead and close the public portion if that's acceptable to you.
Yes.
Okay.
No one else? Close the public portion is fine.
Okay. I don't know if this is a question for you. What Councilperson Wisakowski is bringing up in terms of sequencing, is it possible for the applicant to go forward to seek a remedy from the county if they don't have their rule?
Is it possible? Yeah, I can't say it's impossible. I mean, it's possible. There's no law that says what sequence you have to do your applications in. I mean, as a general rule, the applicant comes to the municipality first before going to the county, particularly with an application like this. And there's good reasons to do so, because unless the applicant knows what the board wants, you can't. It'd be difficult to present an application to the county, because then it might require going back to the county again after the board or to make whatever changes it wants to make. You wouldn't want to be locked in by having the county make its determinations. It would be preferable for the board to make the recommendations or the decisions, and then it's presented that way to the county. And that's the way that it's usually done.
Okay. Time for more comments.
I just had a question. I guess this would be for Mr. Manis. Since you have a history, or even anyone else who's been on the board for a long period of time and has some more tenure, is it usual or customary to have, we're talking about this other traffic study that hasn't come to fruition yet, and it seems like everyone's indicating that it will yield the results that everyone's hoping for. Do applications like this normally, is this the normal way for an application to get approved with this supposed unfinalized traffic study?
It varies from board to board that I've worked for.
Okay.
It's really, I guess, a matter of your comfort in what you're saying, okay, they can take care of that as part of essentially resolution compliance. So that's for the individual board members. some boards will turn over a lot of stuff to their professionals. Other boards, and I just had this happen in Stafford Township, where we talked about some, it was a relatively small site, some changes on the site and impacts to the landscape buffering, moving parking around. It was fairly simple. It's like an old gas station. It's not going to put ice cream. It's that size site. And the board members approved it with the condition that they would have a concept plan waiting for them at the next meeting so that they could review it and go through it with the design engineer before they memorialize the resolution. So it varies.
So does
Well,
that,
good things.
So I think part of the question is this: what would, let's suppose, for example, that you did it the other way. So what if the traffic signal was denied by the county? I think that's really what you're looking at. If you're saying, and then we'd have to look at the legal issues also, which is you can't, a traffic issue that prevents you from voting in favor of an application has to be due to the traffic generated from the site. It can't be just a general, there's a lot of traffic in the area, so we're going to turn this application down. So if the traffic signal was denied, I guess you have to ask yourself this question: if the traffic signal was denied, would I vote against this application? If the answer to that of the majority of you is yes, you might consider making it a condition. The applicant goes to the county. If they don't get the traffic signal, they come back and they say, I didn't get the traffic signal, so we want you to change that condition. I mean, it's you know, they've offered to do everything, I think, at least that's what the engineers are telling us. They've offered to do everything they can to get the traffic signal. So,
am I allowed to interject one thing? I think the one thing that's important that we had a lot of discussions about among ourselves before we came tonight was I wanted our traffic engineer to be able to represent that he could do a report that found sufficient warrants for the signal. If he couldn't say that, and he said he had to go look at it, I think you'd be right in carrying it and saying, you know what, do the analysis and come back and let's make sure. But he testified under oath, and we're stipulating for the record that based on all the information we have now and the conversations with Mr. Mannix and his traffic consultant at Colliers, that the report will demonstrate warrants are met. And from our perspective, that's really our obligation. And we're willing to do that as a condition of approval. In terms of if it's not, if for some reason the county doesn't permit it, that's a more or less a regional traffic issue that really is not a reason not to permit the site plan, particularly when there's no issues of safety of ingress and egress, which is pretty much the site plan purview of the board when it comes to traffic. So we feel like we've done everything that we've been asked to do to coordinate, and if we can't get the traffic signal, the project, because it substantially complies with your redevelopment plan and has extremely minor relief that has nothing to do with traffic whatsoever, that it should be approved, and the condition should be that we'll revise the analysis to show that the traffic signal is warranted. We'll work with your consultants, and your consultants will be involved in every step of the way, and we'll use our best efforts to get a traffic light.
I do just want to say that I think we all recognize that Starbucks is attractive. The fact that it's going to have a drive-through is attractive. So we know that traffic is going to be increased in that area. And although the ingress and egress is through the Greenway road or whatever it's called, you have to access that road off of Middlesex or Durham. I don't think we can look at it in a vacuum, and I understand that you are working to comply with the comments from the engineer and the planner, but as the sort of the stewards of how things are done here, we have to look at that. We have to look at how traffic is going to be impacted in that area due to the Starbucks, and if the traffic study that the gentleman referred to says a signal is warranted, then I think we need to take that under consideration before we make a final decision, which is why I think that we should either table it until we find out what the county's going to do, or move forward with the condition that the traffic light gets approved.
Obviously, we don't agree with that. I mean, my feeling is the appropriate way to do it is to approve it, subject to the condition that we work with your consultants and to get the traffic light approved.
I understand that's your position. I'm just saying that the town has to live with the consequences of that decision and the increased traffic in that area. So that's all I'm saying. I understand we have a different opinion about that,
sure.
But you have your interest, and we have the interest of the town.
Well, I understand the interest. The thing that we're dealing with from our perspective, and I'm asking you to look at our perspective, the redevelopment plan, or any zoning ordinance, when it allows certain uses, contemplates, and as a given, that there'll be traffic generators based on the type of use it is. So if it's a use variance case, you can consider the fact that it could be increasing traffic beyond what a permitted use was. Here, the use is permitted. So the increase in traffic is something that's contemplated and is part and parcel of your redevelopment plan. So at that point, it would be inappropriate to either not act or condition an application on something that could result in a denial of an application that is for a permitted use that substantially conforms, because it's going to generate traffic, because the traffic generation is a given.
You asked me to look at it from your perspective. I asked you to look at it from our perspective. And this information has been offered up tonight that the traffic study says a signal is warranted. How can we discount that as a board?
Well, you don't discount it as a board, but the problem we have here is we have another authority that may or may not agree. And the county may look at it and say, well, even though you meet warrants, we're going to decide that this isn't an appropriate location. We don't think that's going to happen, and we hope it doesn't happen, but we can't predict with certainty how the county is going to act. And that's our problem. And we, obviously, the redeveloper has invested substantial resources. Funds have been posted for the road already. We've come in with multiple applications already. There's been substantial cleanup, and we're at a point where we need to know that we can go forward in phases with our project. I understand your concern about it, but this is something that we're not, it's beyond our control. All we can do is tell you that we'll do our best, which is what we've said this evening.
Is there another, did I understand that there's another study that needs to be done to further bolster going for the
Our traffic engineer indicated tonight under oath that he will update the study per his discussions with Colliers that will demonstrate the warrants that we'll take back to the county. He didn't say, and as I said, if he said we have to look at it to see, I wouldn't be pushing for a vote. I would say, okay, let's wait to see. But he testified under oath that he feels now, based on the redesign and the redistribution that we've agreed to do, his report will conclude that there's a warrant for the signal, and he will take that to the county.
Is it possible we wait for that conclusion of that report?
I mean, if you want to. All right.
proceeding will be the truth, nothing but the truth.
I do.
Okay?
Stuart Schooler, 8812 Transu Drive, Bethesda, Maryland. I'm the managing partner, excuse me, of Metuchen 1 and Metuchen 3. Which one's the applicant? This is Metuchen 3. I'd like to address some of your concerns, Ms. Koskowski, if I may. We put up a bond for this traffic light in 2008 or 9, and because the traffic counts were speculative throughout that period of time, for a period of 6 years, we had a bond up with the county, and the county was unwilling to agree to a traffic light because those counts were speculative. The county is looking for actual counts and actual warrants. If the Starbucks is approved and the traffic light is approved, that's great. If the traffic light isn't approved, as this development proceeds, I believe you and Ms. Pearlstein have noted the traffic has increased at the Sportsplex. That's going to also substantially increase the traffic counts on the warrants. This isn't a one-off kind of thing, but as we found in 2009, we need actual counts to sustain the warrants sometime. So we have another project coming in for, I don't know which parcel, the parcel behind Starbucks. We will do another traffic study at that point if we don't have a traffic light approved yet. It's important to note that nobody wants this traffic light more than the developer. And the reason the developer wants it is because its users and its customers want it. And they see that it enhances traffic access and so forth. You and I own an electric car. I bike to work. You and I would like to see more bike racks. I will tell you for the record that I have never not gone to some place because there was no bike rack. I find a tree, I find a telephone pole, and that's where I lock my bike. If we have never used more than 2 bike racks, spaces at the bike racks at the Sportsplex. But if we are successful in getting everybody to drive electric cars and bike to work, we don't have a problem with traffic counts, do we? But unfortunately, you and I are in the minority. We want to see these people biking, and we want to see these people using electric cars, but we're not there yet. Right now, we got people driving to the Sportsplex, and it is my hope that we will reach those traffic counts that we all desire.
I'm sorry, did I misunderstand? Because I thought the traffic engineer already said that, that the studies
You did not misunderstand. I think what I've said is consistent with, I can't guarantee the county's decision. And I think the county's decision...
I understand that, Stuart, and I mean, you know, I've worked with you before. We talked about this project. I am pro, generally speaking, this project. However, I am concerned about that particular aspect, not getting the traffic light. And I'm not saying I don't want to approve this project. I'm saying, can we condition it? Can we table it till we know more information about what's going to happen with that traffic light? That's really all I'm asking and saying. That I just think that you understand the position we're in, because
I understand completely. I do. I'm just
so we need to keep that in mind as we make this decision, because, as I said, the greenway's right there. We're going to develop Trailhead Park. Actually, a coffee shop right there is like a great addition. However, because of the fact that it has the drive-through, and I understand why you want to put that there, I understand that. We have to keep in mind what that's going to do to that area with regard to cars, and if we can't get the traffic light, and then I have a different opinion about how this goes.
I understand. I promised myself when I got up here that I wouldn't repeat anything that the professionals have said, and I'm not going to do that. But I think the time for that was when the redevelopment agreement and the redevelopment ordinance were considered, because the drive-through was in there then, and we all knew what was coming in, and it was approved unanimously, if I recall correctly. This isn't the appropriate time. And you're right. I agree with everything you've said, but this just isn't the right time.
I mean, this is, as far as I see it, this is the last moment that we could try to make sure that we're managing traffic and pedestrians and all that. So
All right, we understand each other. Thank you. Thank you. So do I have any more questions now? I mean, I will.
Well, you can stand.
I'll stand.
Anybody else?
Go ahead. Well, I don't have a question, I just have a statement. I listened with great interest to all the professionals. I asked, I felt some pertinent questions regarding the traffic, comparing it to the other Starbucks location, asking about signage. At this point, I think I personally have to agree with the applicant. I think that we have a redevelopment ordinance regarding whatever the proper terminology is for this area. It contemplates all these parcels being developed. If we don't approve this, when they come for the next one, are we not going to approve that without a light also? And if they come for the next one, and we have, are we just going to stop the development of this entire parcel, this entire area, which the borough has been negotiating with the developer, writing a redevelopment plan, approving it unanimously? Are we going to put all development on hold, costing the applicants money? A lot of money is already gone. It's not my money. I'm just saying, I'm in business also. Having the applicant spend all of this money developing these plans. We have a professional who's testified that the traffic study will say what we all hope it says. I think we have to rely on, first of all, he's on the road, he's not lying, and that his professional credentials say that it's going to say what he says it's going to say. So to wait for that study to be completed seems to be a formality that I don't think we have to. And I understand that we're concerned about traffic, but this thing is the concept, the redevelopment concept is already approved. You guys passed it unanimously. So now to hold this one parcel, and what about the senior center that we already approved? I don't remember talking about traffic like that. There aren't people going there. And why do we think that the 10 cars at a time at Starbucks is going to add that much more traffic than all these other developments are going to add? Why are we saying this development has to wait for the traffic light? Well, all these other developments, we can just approve without it. I don't know. I understand the concern, but this area needs to be redeveloped. It's in essence a 50-year brownfield, and I don't really think we should hold it up. I think we want to be seen to be working with the developer who's working with. It seems to be. I'm not involved. I'm not on the borough council. I haven't seen any of these negotiations, but it seems that the developer has worked with the borough for a very long time to make these things come to fruition. And here we are at the end and saying, well, wait a minute. What if the county doesn't improve the light? It's an awful lot of development that has already been contemplated. Now we're going to talk about a light. I understand that there's political aspects of this. I understand we lobby for the light. We have a developer that's willing to do anything to work with the borough to get the light approved. We have, they're an important part of Middlesex County. The Metuchen, we just had the governor here signing. We've had grants from the county. I understand nothing's guaranteed, but I think we have to have a little faith that the county will do the right thing and that this development will be the best it can. But we've already, not we, the planning board, but the borough has already approved this redevelopment plan. The whole thing, now that it's actually being redeveloped, seems to me to be a mistake.
Okay. Said, anyone say? More comments?
Just a question for Mr. Renaud. There was some inconsistency between what I heard from the applicant's attorney versus what you had said earlier about if the development is coming in and about the traffic, that there is a rationale. I think I need a little bit more clarity in terms of, and I think the board would be served well with clarity in terms of, what's the parameters with the board in terms of the traffic? It seems like that's the thing that is, everyone thinks this is a good project, but the concern is the jeopardy that we're putting the borough in terms of having a recreational aspect across the street and not having more clarity on how the traffic's going to be handled. Because at the end of the day, you are bringing an intensive traffic use. I know just from working with everyone when it comes to memory care and these other things, it's not as heavily used. When you have a drive-through, Starbucks is banking on the fact that you're going to have a lot of automobiles and a lot of traffic. It was said just before that the model is you have a drive-through. So I think I want some more clarity, and I think the board would be best served to get a little bit more clarity on if that is something that they can say, hey, let's just put this on pause until we see what comes out of the traffic study.
Well, that's it. There are several different questions in there.
Yes.
One of them is, if you wanted to, could you wait until the next meeting, for example, and look at the traffic study? And I'm not advocating any of these ideas, understand, I'm just trying to answer the question and give you whatever the options are. Yes, you could say, well, we'd like to see the traffic study before we vote on the application, for example. Again, I'm not suggesting that you do, I'm saying that that's perfectly within your ability to do that if you wanted to do that with the traffic study. Generally, and probably if you were going to postpone it, I would probably put together some sort of a legal memo. But as a general rule, the fact that there are parks and people walking around and Trailhead Park and Greenway and all those things are not the applicant's problem. The applicant is only really required to deal with the traffic that's generated from the site. And as Mr. Tripp is correct, he doesn't, because of the fact that it's a permitted use and that the redevelopment plan is essentially designed to foster the development of the site, it's not their responsibility to solve the traffic problems in the area. And again, it wasn't a requirement of the redevelopment agreement that take place. At least as far as I know, it wasn't a requirement of the redevelopment agreement that a traffic light be installed. So, I think you could take all those things into consideration. I don't think there's anything wrong with saying we'd like to see the traffic study if that's what you want, and maybe listen to testimony about it. I don't know that that's going to move the ball any or satisfy anybody candidly, but that's an option if you wanted to take it. I mean, we're well within the time period for making a decision on this application.
Okay. Chair will entertain a motion. Anybody got one?
I'll make a motion. I'd like to make a motion to approve the application with the stipulations as discussed that the applicant will work with the borough to, in all and every way possible, to facilitate an application to the county for a light at that corner, and will accommodate all the other agreements that they've made here on the record. Is that an appropriate motion, Mr. Chairman?
It is. Thank you, John. Is there a second?
Second.
We have a second. Denise?
All right, before we vote, I just wanted to talk about conditions that have been discussed. One of them is the one that Mr. Clifton mentioned, and of course that would be one of the conditions. I would like to clarify from what I thought I heard, I thought that I heard the applicant agree to all of the conditions and recommendations in both the planner's memo and the engineer's memo, but I'd like to clarify that.
We agree to it except as more modified, or anything that was modified during the discussion in terms of the waivers, like for example, on some of the things where relief was identified, and we had Mr. Cosenza weigh in on it. But other than that, we agree with the reports.
Okay. We have generally required where there's structures for water quality and stormwater management require an operations and maintenance manual that require a recording of that so as to memorialize whatever it is that's
Recording the O&M manual?
right.
Yeah, we always do that.
That's up in our,
Yeah, and that's in the regs.
Yes.
Yeah. It's a requirement.
that they would work with the planner to add bike racks, whether anybody uses them or not. And let's see. And we discussed the variances, and I would recommend for those, for example, the maximum front setback that we grant the variance. If it turns out that they don't need the variance, that's fine if you're inclined to do that. So I think those would be, and you know, we have the usual, and Mr. Tripp is familiar with them, our usual conditions. And did you agree to provide an electric vehicle charging station? I know you said if you were required to do it, so.
Yeah.
They said yes.
They said yes. We decided that you said yes.
We have 6 at the sportsplex. We're happy to do it here if somebody really thinks it'll get used.
Okay. And I believe that's it.
Okay, Denise?
Ms. Carson? Yes. Councilmember Frostowski?
I'm sorry, I hate to prolong this, but I'm very torn because although I do like the project, I do have some very strong concerns that I wish that I did not have to make this decision tonight. So I'm wondering if there's another answer that can I abstain? Can I
Sure, you can abstain.
be president? You know.
Yes, you can abstain if you wish to abstain, certainly. Or yes, no, or abstain.
I abstain.
Ms. Carlstein?
Yes.
Mr. Love?
Yes.
Ms. Novak?
Just wanted to make a comment before I vote, is that I certainly understand Councilwoman's concerns about the traffic light, but I think the fact that the use is part of the redevelopment plan, trying to trumps that, and that's why I will vote yes.
Mr. Richter?
Yes.
Mr. Griffin?
I join in with Ms. Guskowski about this one. There's no reason for me to vote against this, but I don't think that this is a good development for the township, either environmentally or traffic-wise. So I'm going to join her in abstaining because I can't vote for this, but there's no reason for me to vote against it.
Ms. Cron? Yes. Mr. Ellison?
Yes. Application is successful, congratulations.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I appreciate the
Board members.